Chapter 3115, 3115 Framed. Chapter 3115, 3115 Framed. 3115 Framed. Miaoying had just lost a Meridian guiding pill and found a bottle which contained an alchemical pill on Huan Shui. Was there such a coincidence in the world? She must be the thief. Ling Han frowned. He naturally believed that the little handmaiden was not a thief. This was an obvious attempt to frame her. He had miscalculated. He didn't expect that he wasn't the target, but rather his maid was. As the saying went, even if you hit a dog, you had to look at the owner first. If he interfered, then with evidence, he would only be dragged down into the mud as well. He might even be thought to be the mastermind behind it. And if he did not do anything, then everyone would look down on him. If he could not even save his own subordinate, how could such a person be worthy of becoming the Dao Child? Bullsh *T. Ling Han looked towards Changdan. Had this gentle and refined-looking person come up with this idea? Miaoying came over aggressively and appeared in front of Huan Shui. She raised her hand and was about to slap her. However, her hand didn't land. It wasn't because she was soft-hearted, but because there was another person in front of Huan Shui. It was Ling Han. "Get lost," Miaoying said coldly. Ling Han shook his head and said, "This is my maid, so it's not your place to discipline her." Hiss, everyone exclaimed in their hearts. Was Ling Han really going to go against Miaoying for the sake of a maid? "How dare you?" Miaoying sneered. Someone beside her came over and told her Ling Han's identity. She gave an O and said, "So you're Ling Han. No wonder you dare to be impudent in front of me. However, do you think I'm afraid of you?" Her face was full of pride. "Now I wonder if you are the mastermind behind this. Are you the one who ordered this B*TCH to steal what belongs to me? And now that you are trying so hard to protect her, you want to cover up the truth, right?" "I didn't steal it," Huan Shui said anxiously. "Humph, you have been caught red-handed, and you still want to deny it?" Miaoying glanced at Huan Shui with disdain. "That's right. We've caught you red-handed. How are you going to deny it?" Rui Yuanliang said with a smile. "Sigh, I really didn't expect junior brother Ling to be such a person." Lao Lian chimed in, directly targeting Ling Han. "Hee. Tan Galboa merely twitched his lips with a fake smile. Changdan revealed a pained expression and said, "Junior brother Ling, how can you be so foolish?" He shook his head and turned to Miaoying. "Junior sister, can you let this matter go on my account? Senior brother will think of a way to give you a Meridian guiding pill." Everyone was in an uproar when they heard this. They felt a strong sense of respect for Changdan. Look, this was the real person that they publicly acknowledged as a prodigy of the ancient Dao sect. It clearly had nothing to do with him, yet he had taken on this matter to intercede on Ling Han's behalf. In fact, in order to exonerate Ling Han, he had even taken on the debt of a Meridian guiding pill. One had to know that he was a 9 Meridians, and he needed the Meridian guiding fruit and the Meridian guiding pill the most. If he obtained them, he would definitely consume them himself. But now, he was willing to give them away for the sake of his junior brother who was from the same sect. How could they not admire such generosity and kindness? "Senior brotherly," many people shouted. It was great to have such a senior brother in the sect. In the future, he would definitely be able to become a giant tree that supported the ancient Dao sect and protected them from the storms raging outside. "All right, for senior brother Li's sake, I won't pursue this matter any further," Miaoying said as her beautiful eyes swept over Ling Han and Huan Shui, revealing deep disdain and ridicule. "You're really lucky to have senior brother Li to speak up for you. Otherwise, humph." She was still angry. To think that they actually dared to steal from her. "Get lost. Don't let me see you again." Ling Han smiled faintly. Changdan really did things beautifully. Not only did he show off his greatness, but he also gave him a blow at the same time, confirming that Ling Han and Huan Shui had colluded with each other and their supposed crime of theft. In this way, no matter how much Sun Jianfeng liked Ling Han, how could he have the cheek to make him the Dao Child? Wouldn't he be afraid of being laughed at if word got out? Wait. Ling Han waved his hand. He had never been the type to allow others to bully him. They wanted to frame him? Hee, didn't they know that he had an attribute of being extremely lucky? You people are really audacious. Ling Han shook his head and pointed at the bottle as he said, "This was clearly something I bestowed upon my little handmaiden. When did it become stolen goods? Is this a blatant robbery of what is originally mine?" Ah! Everyone was shocked. What was going on? Logically speaking, even if Ling Han didn't accept this favor from Li Changdan, he should still try his best to disassociate himself from this bottle and that alchemical pill. He could even say that he had been framed. However, Ling Han actually said this. This was truly beyond everyone's expectations. Was he courting death? Even Li Changdan didn't expect this. This matter had gone completely out of his control. He felt a sense of unease that things might develop in an unknown direction. However, he immediately shook his head. After Ling Han admitted it, wouldn't that be even more impossible to refute? Humph, I'd like to see how you court death. Miaoyin was furious. This thief stole from her and still dared to make a false countercharge. You scoundrel, how dare you slander me? Fine. If I don't punish you today, my name won't be Miaoyin, she balefully said. She was already infuriated. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Since you all say that this is stolen goods, I would like to ask you, how do you prove that this is your alchemical pill? Is there any need to prove it?" Everyone shook their head in their hearts. Ling Han's counterattack, or rather excuse, was too weak. "Oh, Miaoyin just said that a Meridian guiding pill was stolen, and she found it on your maid. Is there such a coincidence in this world?" Miaoyin suppressed her anger and asked indifferently, "Let me ask you, what alchemical pill is this?" "The Meridian guiding pill," Ling Han said. Since he had been framed, this pill was definitely the Meridian guiding pill. Everyone was stunned for a moment. "You even admitted it yourself? What else was there to say?" Humph. Miaoyin sneered. She couldn't be bothered to continue speaking. It was a complete waste of time. Everyone looked at Ling Han as if they were looking at a fool. How could such a person become the Dao Child? What kind of joke was this? If he were to inherit the position of sect master, they would only be crushed to death by the rolling wheels of the Great Era. Huan Shui, on the other hand, was extremely anxious. If killing herself could help Ling Han resolve this problem, she would give up her life without hesitation. Roalpha and Dialphes nu Omicron v Epsilon L Omicron M. Ling Han laughed, took out a bottle from his shirt, and said, "I have another Meridian guiding pill here. Could it be that you guys are saying that I stole it again?" Why was there another Meridian guiding pill? Ling Han took out another pill bottle and said, "If it's not enough, there's still one more. Yes, there's another here too." He took out the third pill bottle. The Meridian guiding pills were too precious, and it was not safe to leave them in his rooms, so Ling Han kept them close. Everyone was dumbfounded. Was this for real? So many of them were all Meridian guiding pills? If these Meridian guiding pills were real, then this matter was really undecided. Chapter 31:16, 3116 tables turned. Chapter 31:16, 3116 tables turned. 3116 tables turned. What was going on? The maid was clearly caught red-handed. But why did the quantity of stolen goods exceed the quantity that she should have? Humph, just because you say this is a Meridian guiding pill, does that mean it's genuinely a Meridian guiding pill? Miaoyin asked coldly. Of course. Ling Han appeared extremely confident. Why should I believe you? Miaoyin said disdainfully. One had to know that this Meridian guiding fruit was something that her grandfather had paid a huge price to obtain. What right did Ling Han, a disciple who had just entered the sect, have to obtain it, and even having obtained 3 of them? Get someone to appraise it, someone said. Everyone nodded in agreement. Getting someone to appraise it would resolve the matter, simple as that. Ask who to appraise. Let me do it. A young man stepped forward. He was quite good-looking, but there was a cunning expression on his face. This voice sounds a little familiar. Brother Nye, Rue Yuanliang, Lao Liyan, and the others dare not treat him lightly, and collectively cupped their hands in greeting. Ling Han immediately remembered that this guy was Nyeyang. This guy seemed to have a powerful background, so it was normal for him to be invited to He Miaoying's birthday banquet today. Nie Yang seemed to have a high status among these second-generation young masters, so when he wanted to be the appraiser, the others were extremely confident of his ability to do so. However, in Ling Han's eyes, no matter how he looked at it, this guy seemed to be quite incompetent and unreliable. Nie Yang uncorked the bottles one by one. After comparing them carefully, he said, "Based on my experience, these 4 are all Meridian guiding pills." What? Everyone was shocked. They were all genuine. Hiss, wasn't it said that Sun Jianfeng had only given Ling Han 3 Meridian guiding fruits? Could it be that there were still other Meridian guiding pills? Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Couldn't I have asked someone to refine it to produce a pill?" This explanation was indeed reasonable, but the problem was, when did the ancient Dao sect have a formation alchemist? No, there really is. Yes, a few days ago, a mysterious person was selling Meridian guiding pills in the black market. Moreover, he even traded pills for fruits. Clearly, he must have mastered the refining method of the Meridian guiding pill. Some people immediately spoke up. What? There's really someone selling Meridian guiding pills? Some people weren't aware of this, so they were naturally very surprised. If Ling Han knows this person, then it wouldn't be strange for him to get this person to refine the Meridian guiding fruit into a pill. So long as 1 Meridian guiding fruit was refined, it ought to produce at least 3 or 4 pills, right? Therefore, it wouldn't be surprising that 3 Meridian guiding fruits could produce 4 Meridian guiding pills. Everyone nodded, all of them leaning towards the fact that these Meridian guiding pills were acquired by Ling Han through a trade. By the way, do you know who that woman is? Someone pointed at Huan Shui. Isn't she some junior sister from the sect? Wrong. She's actually a maid. More than a month ago, when I went to Ling Han's place, I saw her with my own eyes. Hey, now that you mention it, I remember too. There is indeed such a maid. Hiss. Everyone gasped in astonishment. The former maid had now become a 2 Meridians elite. What did this mean? Ling Han had to have many Meridian guiding pills in his hands, which directly caused his maid to dash into becoming a 2 Meridians. They were about to cry. How extravagant could you be? No matter how many Meridian guiding pills you possess, how could you squander them like this? How good would it be for him to give it to them? With their natural talent in martial arts, the same amount of Meridian guiding pills would definitely be more effective on them. Therefore, it wouldn't be strange that Huan Shui had a Meridian guiding pill on her. It was probably leftovers from what she had been given. I really want to be bestowed with one too. Everyone looked at Ling Han eagerly. If not for the fact that their status as cultivators did not allow them to do so, they would all have the urge to hug Ling Han's thigh and become his lackeys. Li Changdan was speechless. This matter was resolved just like that. As far as he was concerned, there was no solution to this, but Ling Han had taken care of it effortlessly. He naturally knew very well that the Meridian guiding pill found on Huan Shui indeed belonged to He Miaoying because it was stolen by Rue Yuanliang and the other 2, and the 3 of them did not hide this matter from him. It was too fucking strange. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Now surely my little handmaiden's innocence can be proven?" He Miaoying had nothing to say. She had heard it just now. Huan Shui was originally a maid, but now she had become a 2 Meridians. How many Meridian guiding pills would he have to spend to nurture a person with ordinary aptitude into a 2 Meridians? Who would believe that such a wealthy person would steal her Meridian guiding pill? Even she wouldn't be able to believe it. Ling Han swept his gaze over the crowd. No one said anything else as they all lowered their heads. He then turned his gaze to He Miaoying and said, "Since this is a completely false accusation, then apologize to my maid." He Miaoying was stunned. What? He even wanted her to apologize? What did she do wrong? Her possession had been stolen. Could it be that it was wrong for her to search for what she had lost? Ling Han said, "It's naturally not wrong for you to be looking for lost items, but it's wrong for you to verbally insult someone before you've figured out the situation." He had not forgotten that He Miaoying had previously called Huan Shui AB*TCH. Who could be allowed to humiliate his maid? He had to slap her back in retribution of the insult she had hurled at his maid. Only then did Hypocrite remember, and she couldn't help revealing a proud expression. So what if I wronged her? She's just a servant. Can't I scold her? I don't care who she was in the past, but now she's my maid. You insulting her is equivalent to insulting me. Ling Han's expression became menacing, and his gaze was sharp as a sword as he stared straight at Hypocrite. Do you think I'm easy to bully? Under his gaze, Hypocrite couldn't help but feel a little flustered. Was this really a young man? Why did she feel that the other party was an ancient monster, a terrifying demonic beast that was currently at the peak of its cultivation? It made her feel an extreme chill from the bottom of her heart. A smile appeared on the corners of Ling Han's mouth, and he said, Junior Sister He, do you not know that the sect has rules? To humiliate a fellow disciple, what kind of serious crime is this? Over the past few days, he had been tinkering with the optical computer whenever he was free. He already acquired quite an in-depth understanding of this world. Since he was now in the ancient Dao sect, how could he not make himself understand the rules of the sect? Hypocrite was stunned. In the sect, humiliating a fellow disciple was a serious crime. If things were to really escalate, even if she was the granddaughter of an elder, she would still be punished. She would definitely be whipped at the mountain gate. Under her grandfather's protection, she believed that it wouldn't hurt even if she was whipped a few times. However, the problem was, how embarrassing would that be? She quickly calmed herself down and said, I was not insulting you. It was directed at her. She pointed at Huan Shui. Ling Han nodded and said, It's good that you admit it. What did I admit? Hypocrite was getting a bad feeling. Ling Han said calmly, according to the rules of the sect, as long as one's meridians could be detected, whether it's in a gardener, servant, or coachman, one will automatically be promoted to become a disciple of the sect. Therefore, in the case of my maid, she is also a disciple of the sect. Since you've admitted to insulting her, do you still want to deny it in front of so many people? Hypocrite was speechless. For a moment, her heart was filled with panic, and her mind seemed to have gone blank. Apologize. Ling Han raised his voice. This shout was like the roll of thunder. Hypocrite's heart was in a chaotic state. She blurted out, I'm sorry. Chapter 31:17, 31:17 Reforging the Meridians. Chapter 31:17, 3117 Reforging the Meridians. 31:17 Reforging the Meridians. As soon as the words were uttered, Hypocrite was stunned. She had actually lowered her head in front of a lowly servant. What she didn't know was that Ling Han had even channeled the brother monkey cultivation technique when he shouted, which was why he had directly stunned her mind. Seeing that Hypocrite had really apologized, everyone found it unacceptable. Who didn't know that Hypocrite was incomparably proud and had the temperament of an extremely spoiled young mistress? To say nothing of insulting others, she had even beaten up junior brothers of the sect before. However, others were apprehensive of her grandfather, and thus chose to keep the peace. They didn't dare to complain to the sect at all. She even managed to suppress such a serious matter, but now, she was lowering her head just because she had called the maid a B***tch. Unbelievable. Everyone looked at Hypocrite, and then at Ling Han. They all had a feeling that perhaps a real dragon of the sect was about to soar. However, Ling Han was very dissatisfied. He first suppressed Hypocrite in terms of aura, and then used the brother monkey cultivation technique and combined it with a shout. Only then was Hypocrite caught off guard and blurted out the words, I'm sorry. Sigh. If it had been in the past, he would already have made her kneel and kowtow. He shook his head and said to Huan Shui, Let's go. Huan Shui's face was filled with pride. This was her master. For her, he could go against a young mistress like Hypocrite. He was her god. She obediently walked behind Ling Han carefully. Ling Han started walking. When he walked past Rui Yuanliang and the other two, he paused for a moment and said, Thanks. Thanks for what? The others were all baffled, but Rui Yuanliang and the other two knew why. Ling Han was thanking them for personally giving him a meridian guiding pill. They really wanted to vomit blood. This matter of stealing the pill would definitely be exposed. When that happened, Himiaoyan would naturally ask them to pay compensation. Originally, as long as they had successfully framed Ling Han and Huan Shui, then naturally no one would have called them to account for this matter, but now they had to swallow this grievance in silence. Otherwise, if word got out that they had framed their junior brother from the same sect, they would be kicked out of the sect, and even their elders would not be able to save them. If it was just stealing the pill, they could still say that they were fooling around with Himiaoyan, and it wouldn't be that difficult to resolve the matter. They were all extremely depressed. They had laid such a flawless trap, so how could Ling Han easily jump out of it, and even conveniently trample all over their faces? This Ling Han continued walking, and when he reached Nie Yang's side, he paused again. Nie Yang smiled at him and winked at him. Obviously, this guy had also recognized Ling Han. After all, Ling Han didn't change his voice at that time. Yes, just as he had expected, this person was a show-off. With everyone watching, Ling Han and Huan Shui walked out of the main hall, out of the courtyard, and then headed back to their residence. After returning home, Huan Shui hurriedly handed the Meridian guiding pill to Ling Han and said, "Young master, Huan Shui almost implicated you today." Ling Han smiled and said, "Since this was gifted to you by someone else, take it." He recalled the faces of Rue Yuanliang and the other two, and the corners of his mouth revealed a menacing expression. They actually dared to extend their claws toward him? However, the mastermind behind all this should be Changdan, right? Just because of the title of the Dao Child, this fellow was conspiring to get rid of Ling Han? Ling Han was now certain that the person who had ordered Zheng Tongfeng to bring him to the casino and wanted him to fall was definitely Changdan. However, Changdan was known as a prodigy and was now at the peak stage of the 9 Meridians. His battle prowess was probably much stronger than that of ordinary people. If the two of them were to engage in a fierce battle now, Ling Han would definitely lose. The higher one's cultivation level was, the greater the difference in strength. This was especially true for the 10 Meridians. This was a dividing line. Why could one only become a sect elder after opening the 10 Meridians? This was because a cultivator's strength would undergo a huge transformation after his cultivation had advanced to 10 Meridians. The power he cultivated in his body could be unleashed from afar, and at 12 Meridians, he could even injure people 100 steps away. His opponents weren't even qualified to approach him. It's all about ability. Ability. Ling Han muttered, "If I let Changdan advance to 10 Meridians first, then I will be at an absolute disadvantage. Therefore, I must catch up to his cultivation as soon as possible." The next morning, he welcomed the morning sun and cultivated as usual, and the little maidservant also joined in. He sat at the side and cultivated, while Huan Shui was practicing fist techniques. This scene was a little strange. Ling Han was clearly a tall man with long legs, but he was sitting quietly at the side, while a delicate beauty was punching and kicking, making her seem very violent. Ling Han's nostrils flared. Instantly, invisible energy was inhaled through his nose and circulated within his body. Absorption of the energy wasn't just limited to his meridians. Even a portion of his physical body would similarly absorb the energy. It was probably due to the tempering by this energy that his physical body had advanced to become even more powerful. Brother Monkey had said that this cultivation technique had great benefits. As expected, the more one cultivated it, the more one would gain new insights. Half an hour was naturally not a long time, and Ling Han used the spirit gathering formation again. However, he discovered that as his cultivation level increased, the effect of the spirit gathering formation on him also became weaker and weaker. Is the level of the spirit gathering formation too low? Ling Han deduced that the martial arts of this world had just begun, and everything originated from ancient sites buried deep underground. In that case, the formations that had appeared now were naturally very backward and belonged to the most superficial level. No, another reason is because of the cultivation technique I'm cultivating now. Ling Han's insight was naturally sharp. He discovered that the cultivation technique he was currently cultivating was like a millstone, grinding and purifying the power in his body, removing the dregs, leaving behind essence, and increasing the level of quality. However, this would definitely cause his cultivation speed to slow down. His cultivation when the sun rose was still all right. The energy of heaven and earth was very pure to begin with. Although some impurities would be removed, there were not many of them. At most, half of them would be worn away. However, the energy produced by the spirit gathering formation was different. There were countless impurities, and it was difficult to sieve through all of them. Therefore, the effect of the spirit gathering formation was greatly reduced. If I were to use the 4 directional fists, such a situation would not happen. It would allow my cultivation level to continue increasing at a high speed. But what's the point of having such a high cultivation level? It's just an empty shell. It looks good, but it's useless. When you're building your foundation, you must not take shortcuts. Ling Han decided to reconstruct the meridians he had previously cultivated and purify his power. Otherwise, this would definitely affect his advancement in the future. Fortunately, I met Brother Monkey. Otherwise, if I finished cultivating the meridian opening tier with the 4 directional fists, then I don't know how much of a price I would have to pay if I wanted to reconstruct the foundation in the future. Ling Han went on to recultivate the few meridians from before. This was because he didn't need to absorb external energy, so there was no time limit on cultivation. After spending 3 days, he had completely purified the power in his body. Although his cultivation level had decreased significantly, his power hadn't. Instead, the power of his attacks had increased. It's like a sword. If it's filled with impurities, even if it's struck with great power, it will only shatter when it clashes with a stone. However, if it is forged into a sword of refined iron, even if its power is slightly weaker, it can still leave marks on the stone. Chapter 31:18, 31:18 Force Decision. Chapter 31:18, 31:18 Force Decision. 31:18 Force Decision. Ling Han was unable to continue his seclusion because Nie Yang had arrived. "You bastard! You've kept me in the dark for so long," he rebuked. Ling Han smiled and said, "That's because you're dense. What can I do?" Nie Yang slapped his forehead. Wasn't this Han Lin? When recited backwards, Ling Han? The other party had indeed reported his real name from the beginning, but it was he himself who hadn't linked the 2 names together at all. "I don't care. You have to compensate me." He was behaving shamelessly. Ling Han smiled, tossed out a pill bottle, and said, "This is for you." This was something he had decided long ago. Nie Yang reached out and took it. He smiled and said, "Don't tell me that this is a meridian guiding pill." "That's right, it's the meridian guiding pill," Ling Han said. "Hey, you're not saying that you're giving this to me as a gift, are you?" Nie Yang exclaimed. Ling Han couldn't be bothered. Didn't he say from the start that it was a gift? Fuck, I knew I was right to become friends with you. You're really something. Nie Yang laughed loudly and came over wanting to put his arm around Ling Han's shoulder. Ling Han took a step back, not allowing him to succeed. "Hee hee, we're all men. Why are you shy?" Nie Yang teased. A show-off was a show-off, no matter where he was. Ling Han merely glanced at this fellow and didn't pay any attention to him. "Haha, you still don't know, right?" Rui Yuanliang and the other 2 guys were extremely miserable. Nie Yang changed the topic. After the investigation, it turned out that they stole that meridian guiding pill and were severely reprimanded by their elders. Rui Yuanliang was the most miserable one. He only managed to climb up the social ladder by captivating the young lady of the Qi clan. He was never in Elder Qi's good graces to begin with. Now that such a scandal had happened, Elder Qi hung him at the door, and he was thrashed for the entire afternoon. Nie Yang chuckled and gloated. Ling Han's expression was calm and didn't express much joy over the matter. If he hadn't happened to refine the meridian guiding fruit, he would have been the one unable to clean up the mess. If it weren't for the young lady from the Qi clan pleading for mercy, Rui Yuanliang would probably still be hanging there, Nie Yang said leisurely, as if he was looking forward to it. "You don't get along with these people, do you?" Ling Han asked. "Of course." Nie Yang revealed a look of disdain. Those guys only depended on their elders in the family and relied on many Meridian guiding fruits to achieve their current cultivation level. How much ability do they really have? And yet they act smug all day long and look down on everyone. Pei, I really look down on them. Ling Han smiled faintly. Nie Yang was indeed a little different. However, Rue Yuanliang and the others will definitely blame this on you. So you have to be careful. Even if their cultivation levels come from accumulation, they are still 7 Meridians and 8 Meridians. So they still have abilities, Nie Yang reminded. Ling Han nodded. He was indeed not a match for a 7 Meridians yet, but in a month or two at most, his strength would definitely catch up. If you really run into trouble, come find me. I'll help you resolve it. Nie Yang patted Ling Han's shoulder, appearing very loyal. Ling Han thought to himself that it seemed that he indeed possessed a considerable amount of affinity, but this affinity seemed to have its limitations, which was that the people who liked him would like him even more, while the people who hated him would hate him even more. That's good, though. Wouldn't the path of cultivation be too boring without one pushing the limits? The Ancient Dao Sect, Meeting Hall. At the beginning of each month, Sun Jianfang would gather all the elders in the sect for a discussion on the sect's matters. Usually, there would be no major issues, and the participants would disperse after a brief meeting. However, this time was different. Sect Master, now that the outside world is in turmoil, it's time for our sect to choose the Dao Child and focus our resources on one person to compete with other forces, an elder suddenly said. He was Lao Lian's grandfather, Lao Feng. His cultivation level was said to be of 11 meridians. However, his exact level was a secret which no one knew any details about. Sun Jianfang frowned. What did Lao Feng mean? I also think that we need to settle the matter of the Dao Child as soon as possible. Tan Jing seconded the motion. I think so too. He Guan nodded in agreement. Among the 7 elders, 3 of them expressed the same opinion. What about you guys? Sun Jianfang didn't say anything. He looked at the other 4 people. I agree. Qi Wu nodded. Nie Huayun, Gu Tang, and Zhou Xingbang remained unperturbed, as if they weren't too interested in this matter. Sun Jianfang raised his white brows and said, Then, elders, do you have any suitable candidates? Needless to say, it's definitely Li Changdan, He Guan immediately said. He seemed to be an impatient person. Ever since that kid started cultivating, he has always displayed outstanding talent. Moreover, he has an outstanding magnanimity. All the disciples in the sect are convinced of his abilities and character. No one will have any objections if he becomes the Dao Child. Yes. Qi Wu, Lao Feng, and Tanjing nodded. Nie Huayun wanted to say something, but hesitated. He suppressed the urge and continued to sit quietly. Of course, he wanted to push out his grandson, Nie Yang, but it was obvious that Qi Wu and the other 3 had formed an alliance. How could he fight alone? Therefore, it was better to let Sun Jianfang take the lead. However, this matter was a little uncertain because Zhou Xingbang, Gu Tang, and Sun Jianfang didn't have any descendants. It could be said that no matter who became the Dao Child, it had nothing to do with them. Therefore, it was very likely that Sun Jianfang would accede for the sake of the sect's unity. Sun Jianfang pondered for a moment and said, Have you forgotten that the divine stone broke open and gave birth to a divine son? Since he's not of our race, he must have intentions that are different from us. Qi Wu said disdainfully. Who knows what kind of demon he is? If it was up to me, I'd directly slash him to pieces to avoid any trouble in the future. This old man was really ruthless. Sun Jianfang waved his hand. He had high expectations for Ling Han, so how could he listen to Qi Wu and kill him? In the hands of the great elites of ancient times, it was clearly mentioned that the divine stone would nurture a spiritual being of heaven and earth. The future of our ancient Dao sect should rest on Ling Han's shoulders, Sun Jianfang said. Everyone, I hope that you all can set your sights on the long term. This great era has just begun. I don't know how long the path of cultivation in the future will be. We're just one step ahead and can be surpassed at any time. If we choose the right person, under his leadership, we might all be able to charge towards a higher mountaintop. He Guan laughed and said, Sect Master, I agree with you. We must choose the right candidate for the Dao Child. Therefore, I think highly of Li Changdan. We are already old, and may be trapped at 12 meridians forever, but Changdan is different. In the surging era, he should be able to overcome all kinds of obstacles and challenges, reaching a height that we can only look up to. Yes, I also have high hopes for Changdan. Chi Wu nodded. Therefore, now is the time to win over the hearts of the people. We have to firmly tie Changdan to our ancient Dao sect's battle chariot. Sun Jianfeng raised his brows again. Could it be that Li Changdan would betray the ancient Dao sect in the future? Respecting one's teacher was the basic ethics that a person should have. We have to be careful when choosing the Dao Child, he said slowly. Not only do they need to have standing, but they also need to possess great potential. Since that's the case, let's use the ancient formation for the audition. Chapter 3119, 3119 Audition. Chapter 3119, 3119 Audition. 3119 Audition. The ancient formation has been repaired? Nie Huayan asked. Sun Jianfeng nodded, and then shook his head. A portion has been repaired, but it's far from enough to unleash its full power. Then what does Sect Master mean by an audition? Gu Tang asked. Actually, he was the least bothered by this matter. He didn't have any children, and what he liked the most was money and beautiful women. Therefore, as long as he could ensure that there would be no change to his lifestyle, he didn't mind who the Dao Child was. Sun Jianfeng said, since we're choosing the Dao Child of ancient Dao sect, anyone who is of age can participate. After entering the ancient formation, whoever can walk out first will be the candidate for the Dao Child. Sect Master, may I ask what this ancient formation is like? Tan Jing asked expectantly. If possible, he naturally wanted his grandson to become the Dao Child. He only supported Li Changdan because he knew that his grandson couldn't compare to Li Changdan, and he himself had received benefits from Higuan. But now, he was filled with anticipation. There will be all kinds of tests in the ancient formation, said Sun Jianfeng. Most importantly, if two people fight, the formation will adjust the cultivation level of both sides to ensure it will be a fair battle. It actually has such an effect? The elders were all shocked. Sun Jianfeng nodded. However, I don't know whether it was the ancient formation not being completely repaired, or if it was naturally like this, but it can't adjust the cultivation of both sides to be exactly the same. If it's just a difference of a single meridian, there won't be any adjustments from the formation. If the difference exceeds 1 meridian, it will suppress the one with a higher cultivation level to the point of just slightly exceeding the gap of 1 meridian. The elders all nodded. This way, they would be able to fight fairly. On the other hand, a prodigy could also stand out. For example, Li Changdan had always been invincible among his peers. Even if he encountered opponents who were stronger than him by 1 meridian, he would remain undefeated. However, the suppression of a 10 meridians on a 9 meridians was too great. Right now, Li Changdan could only be invincible among his peers. He was unable to contend against one of 10 meridians. However, if the opponent was dropped to 9 meridians, then Li Changdan would still be the same Li Changdan from before. In this ancient formation, his battle prowess would definitely be number 1. Higuan immediately nodded and said, all right, Sect Master's suggestion is really good. Anyone can participate in the audition. The one who stands out is undoubtedly the Dao Child. No one can say anything further. Yes. Qi Feng and the others nodded. This was indeed relatively fair, but with Li Changdan's strength, who else could compete with him? To be honest, even if they entered the ancient formation, they might not be a match for Li Changdan. Then it's decided, Sun Jianfeng said indifferently. The time is set to be 10 days later. A piece of news spread, shocking the entire ancient Dao sect. Audition for selecting the Dao Child. The Dao Child was actually not decided by the sect master or elders, but was to be selected through an audition. How would he be selected? Everyone went to understand the situation, and then shook their head. Under such rules, who could compete with Li Changdan? Of course, there was also a portion of people looking forward to it. This was because the ancient formation wasn't as simple as just a battle. It also depended on luck. Perhaps if one had a burst of luck, they would be the first to run out of the formation without even having to fight. Everyone was making preparations. There were still 10 days left, so they naturally had to make proper preparations. When Ling Han heard of this, he was also slightly surprised. This was because Sun Jianfeng had previously said that he would be given 3 years to advance to 12 meridians. At that time, he would be appointed as the Dao Child. Why did things suddenly change? However, within the formation, his cultivation level would be suppressed. If there was only a difference of 1 meridian, Ling Han believed that he would still be able to defeat all his opponents. However, the question was, why was selection of the Dao Child being moved ahead of schedule? Someone was causing trouble? At first, Ling Han didn't manage to guess the reason behind this, but within 2 days, there was news that Li Changdan and He Miaoyin were getting engaged, and the time was on the day after the audition for Dao Child. So that was the case. He Guan took the initiative and gave the other elders some benefits so that they could form an alliance to force Sun Jianfeng's hand. Then, Sun Jianfeng would have no choice but to accede. Well, it was Li Changdan again. Ling Han rubbed his chin. Actually, he didn't really care about the status of the Dao Child. He believed in himself. This wasn't something that could be decided by whether he was given the identity of the Dao Child or not. However, Li Changdan's tricks made Ling Han extremely displeased. So he wanted to bully him? Since Li Changdan cared so much about the status of the Dao Child, Ling Han had to take it all the more. Li Changdan? All right, let's meet this ancient Dao sect's #1 prodigy. Ling Han used these 10 days to either cultivate or practice the demonic monkey fists every day. This set of fist techniques was truly vast and profound, as if it was enough for him to use the rest of his life to figure it out. 10 days later, all the youngsters of the ancient Dao sect arrived in front of the Great Formation. At the foot of the mountain, there were paddy fields, forests, and a stretch of river. Who do you guys think will obtain the position of Dao Child? Tisk, is there a need to guess? It must be Senior Brother Li. That's right. Not only is Senior Brother Li of 9 meridians, he's also invincible among his peers. No matter what, I think it's impossible for him to meet his match. That's not necessarily true. Nie Yang and Tu Luo aren't weak, either. It's not certain who will win in a battle of the same level. What a joke. Senior Brother Li is invincible in a battle of the same level, okay? Besides, Nie Yang and Tu Luo haven't even entered the 9 meridians. How can they be a match for Senior Brother Li when there's a difference of 1 meridian? Exactly. The public opinion was basically leaning towards Li Changdan. After all, he had been a top prodigy of the ancient Dao sect ever since he started cultivating. Now that he had the advantage in cultivation level, he definitely had a high chance of winning. Li Changdan is here, someone shouted. In the distance, Li Changdan strode over, accompanied by a delicate beauty. It was He Miaoyin, who had just celebrated her 18th birthday. Li Changdan was dressed in a green martial arts attire, completely revealing his slender and muscular figure. Coupled with his gentle and refined appearance, he was truly elegant and graceful, causing many female disciples to squeal involuntarily. He Miaoyin's face was filled with pride. This incomparably outstanding man would soon become her fiancé, as well as the ancient Dao sect's Dao Child and future sect master. These women, Humph, you're only worthy of being jealous of me. A faint smile was seen on Li Changdan's face. No one could guess what he was thinking. Looks like the rumors are true. Senior Brother Li is really going to get engaged to Junior Sister He. Sigh. I'm so envious of Senior Brother Li, Junior Sister He is so beautiful, and she's also Elder He's granddaughter. Nonsense. It's clearly He Miaoyin who's out of his league. Senior Brother Li is so handsome, so elegant, and so promising. The men were jealous of Li Changdan, while the women were envious of He Miaoyin. Some of them even started fighting. Few people noticed that Ling Han had also walked over from another direction. He glanced at Li Changdan, and a knowing smile appeared on his face. Actually, he understood Li Changdan better than anyone else. Such a person, who called himself a prodigy, actually thought that He Miaoyin was not worthy of him. However, for his future, he had to make some sacrifices. Otherwise, how could he have such an expression when his beloved was right beside him? Chapter 3120, 3120 Searching for Formation Foundations. Chapter 3120, 3120 Searching for Formation Foundations. 3120 Searching for Formation Foundations. Ling Han wasn't interested in expressing his opinion. Firstly, he and He Miaoying weren't friends, and secondly, even if he did, He Miaoying probably wouldn't appreciate his kindness. Instead, she would think that he was deliberately trying to sow discord. It had nothing to do with him. Ling Han stood at the side, waiting for the Great Formation to be activated. Nie Yang, Lao Lian, and the others were also here. They had to try their best and not allow themselves to have any regrets. After a while, Sun Jianfeng, He Guan, Lao Feng, and the other elites walked over together. In this era, every cultivator was an extremely precious resource. However, only those whose cultivation had reached 10 meridians were qualified to truly become a powerful elite. Those with 9 meridians and above could be called king tiers. Sun Jianfeng and the others were publicly acknowledged king tiers. Although they were all very old, it was as if there were dozens or even hundreds of ferocious tigers hidden within their bodies. Once they unleashed their might, it would shake the heavens and earth. Everyone knows the rules, Sun Jianfeng said simply. The first person to walk out of the Great Formation will be our sect's Dao Child. In addition, you can attack as you wish in the Great Formation and need not worry about the consequences. This is because this ancient formation is used as a test. If a fatal situation occurs, the person will be automatically sent out. However, this also means that he will have lost the qualifications to fight for the Dao Child position. All right, go in. He waved his hand. Instantly, those who were determined to fight for the position of Dao Child entered the Great Formation. The ancient formation hadn't been activated yet, but after Sun Jianfeng placed a jade pendant in it, this Great Formation was finally activated. The originally clearly visible ground and forest gradually became blurry, as if it was covered in a thick layer of fog. Those who entered the Great Formation hurriedly broke into a run. The best strategy was none other than to rush out of the Great Formation as quickly as possible without engaging in any battle. However, as soon as they ran, they realized that something was amiss. This was because the surroundings that they had clearly seen earlier had become incomparably blurry. Their visibility was only about 3 meters, and they immediately lost their sense of direction. They couldn't tell which direction was north, south, east, or west. "Wait for me," Li Changdan said softly to He Miaoying. His voice was gentle and intoxicating. He Miaoying nodded and said, "I'll wait for you at the exit. The first person to walk out will definitely be you." Li Changdan smiled proudly and strode toward the ancient formation. On the other side, Ling Han also told his little handmaiden to go back first, while he himself leisurely walked towards the Great Formation. This Great Formation was like a monster that had devoured many people. Mist billowed, as if it had emerged independently from this mountainous region. Ling Han strolled along as he observed his surroundings. Since this was a formation, there was no way one would be the first to leave just by relying on their speed. Therefore, the most important thing at the moment was not to run out, but to observe. If he could see through what formation this was, he would be able to break through it directly. If he couldn't, he would have to see through at least its fundamentals. Otherwise, it would only be a waste of time and energy. Ling Han seemed to be walking casually, but he was actually taking in his surroundings. He made comparisons of his observations and reconstructed them in his mind as he went along. He had never seen this formation before, but he had also studied formations in the Genesis world, so there were bound to be similarities. Furthermore, he was now boosted by various attributes, with affinity, natural talent in alchemy, and, of course, formations. He captured the slightest change, and all kinds of enlightenment arose in his heart. If I take 3 steps here, Ling Han took 3 steps to the left, and the path ahead suddenly opened up. The fog seemed to have instantly disappeared and returned to its original appearance. Not bad. Ling Han walked towards the exit, but he had only taken a dozen steps when the fog appeared once again. He hadn't been able to break through this formation. He had only managed to understand a tiny bit of its secret. If I could master this formation and set it up around my residence, would I still need to worry about being ambushed? Also, such an arrangement would greatly increase the safety factor when exploring the wilderness. The reason why this formation could be set up successfully is definitely because of the formation foundations buried in every corner. I'll go dig out the formation foundations and learn the formation patterns. Ling Han's eyes lit up. He believed that this formation could trap everyone for a long period of time, including Li Changdan, because Ling Han was the only formation alchemist in the entire ancient Dao sect. Li Changdan definitely had not studied formations before. At the very least, he did not have much natural talent in this area. If the other party wanted to walk out, he would have to repeatedly measure every inch of land. He would also have to have an outstanding memory in order to draw a map in his mind. Ling Han was not in a hurry. He relied on his intuition regarding formations and combined it with what he had currently grasped to locate the location of the formation foundations. After coming out of the Divine Stone, his strength had to start from scratch, but he didn't completely start from scratch. This was because he had unimaginable luck, as he possessed astonishing comprehension of formations and alchemy. After searching for a while, Ling Han finally stopped. He began to dig in the ground. This was a competition within the same sect, so no one was allowed to carry a weapon. Ling Han could only snap off a nearby branch and then use the branch as a shovel. He dug 3 feet into the ground, but he still didn't find what he needed. Could it be that it's not here? Ling Han rubbed his chin. Or could it be that I didn't dig deep enough? I'll dig some more. He continued to dig. The 3 feet deep burrow became 5 feet, but he still couldn't find the formation foundations. I'll dig another 3 feet. Ling Han gave himself a limit. After digging continuously and shoveling out a large amount of soil, the corners of Ling Han's mouth couldn't help but curl into a smile. He finally dug it out. Underneath the ground, there was a black pillar erected. It looked like some kind of metal, and there was a strange light flickering on its surface. Ling Han reached out and pulled it out. Fortunately, there wasn't much of the black pillar that was still buried in the ground, so he easily pulled it out. However, as soon as it was pulled out, the flickering brilliance on it immediately dimmed, as if it had turned into an ordinary iron pillar. It was about a foot long, thicker than a forearm, and square-shaped. Each side was engraved with complicated veined patterns, giving one a headache just by looking at it. Ling Han keenly discovered that after digging out this pillar, the fog suddenly disappeared in the radius of about 90 meters. Once the formation foundations were gone, the formation in this area would naturally lose its effectiveness. Ling Han observed the vein patterns on the formation foundations. These were formation patterns, the core secrets of a formation. However, no matter how much he looked, he could not grasp anything. This was because as long as he looked away, his mind would not have the image of the formation patterns at all. If he couldn't remember them at all, how could he learn? Ancient formations are indeed not easy to learn. Ling Han nodded. What should he do? Could it be that he was going to give up just like that? Ling Han looked to his left and right, and after confirming that there was indeed no one around, he hid this black pillar into the layers of his clothing. Yes, I'll take it back and slowly study it. Ling Han, I've finally found you. A voice suddenly sounded from behind Ling Han. Chapter 31:21. 31:21 Cool wind blowing against one's buttocks. Chapter 31:21. 31:21 Cool wind blowing against one's buttocks. 31:21 Cool wind blowing against one's buttocks. Ling Han turned around to look. It was an unfamiliar man who appeared to be in his 30s. Do I know you? Ling Han asked. Humph, I asked you to sell 2 Meridian guiding pills back then, but you refused. I told you before, you'd better not let me see you within the sect, the man said through clenched teeth. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. So it was him. The first time he went to sell pills, he did meet someone who insisted that he sell 2 Meridian guiding pills, and even said some harsh words. However, at that time, Both parties had covered their faces and did not know each other's identities. With Ling Han being outstanding and having made a name for himself at He Miao Yin's birthday banquet, some people would definitely be able to figure out something. "Oh, what do you want now?" Ling Han asked calmly. "Of course I'm going to beat you up." The man charged forward, throwing a punch at Ling Han. "I'm going to personally send you out of the formation and make you lose your chance to become the Dao Child. You'll regret it for the rest of your life." They couldn't kill anyone here, as the Great Formation would send them out at the last moment. Ling Han's feet didn't move. Only when the attack of this punch approached him did he similarly clench a fist and blast it towards his opponent. Pong! That person's body shook, and he couldn't help but stagger backward. After retreating 7 or 8 steps, he finally managed to steady his footing. What? His face was filled with disbelief. He was a 7 Meridians, and his power reached 7,000 kilograms. Even if his cultivation level was suppressed, he was definitely stronger than Ling Han by 1 Meridian. But now, the feeling was reversed. It was as if Ling Han was the one who was superior to him by 1 Meridian. Was Ling Han of 8 Meridians? How was he supposed to believe this? If this brat who had just entered the sect for less than 2 months could leap to 8 Meridians, then what justice was there left in the world? Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "You want to send me out of the Great Formation, but your abilities seem to be a little lacking." The man was so angry that he was trembling. After letting out a loud roar, he immediately charged over again and unleashed his 4 directional fists. Ling Han shook his head. "You're filled with flaws." Over the past few days, he had been studying the demonic monkey fists. Coupled with his insight as a former heavenly venerate, the mastery of his fist techniques had actually already reached an astonishing height. In terms of fist techniques alone, even if Sun Jianfeng unleashed the true 4-directional fists, he might not necessarily be a match for Ling Han. Ling Han only need to move his feet slightly and easily dodge the punch. The man's punch missed, but he swiftly pivoted sideways, leveraging on this force to deliver another heavy punch. Ling Han shook his head repeatedly, shifting his feet as he did so. He looked extremely casual, but no matter how fast the man swung his fists, they did not even touch the corner of Ling Han's clothes. After dozens of punches, that person couldn't help but feel shocked. He stared at Ling Han and suddenly came to a realization. "You've mastered a movement technique?" As soon as this thought crossed his mind, he couldn't help but reveal a greedy expression. Now that the path of martial arts had just begun, there would be ancient techniques appearing from time to time, but the movement techniques were pitifully few in number. Did Lord Sect Master pass this down to Ling Han in private? Why? Just because this guy was some *T divine son? Ah! He roared explosively and attacked Ling Han like a mad tiger. Ling Han threw out a punch, but didn't meet the opponent's attack head-on. Instead, his fist directly blasted through the flaw in that person's fist technique and smashed into that person's cheek. He didn't use too much force, and it was completely insufficient to kill him. Thus, that person only flew into the air and wasn't sent out of the Great Formation. Io! That person fell hard and couldn't help but groan as he lay on the ground. Ling Han walked over, his slender figure casting a shadow over the man's face. "So what if I don't sell you alchemical pills? Do you still have any objections?" Ling Han lifted the man up and slapped him over a dozen times in succession. However, he quickly lost interest. In the Genesis world, those who were his enemies were all supreme prodigies Ji Wuming, Feng Wuding, and Xian Chihu. Only trampling such prodigies would bring pleasure to him. He was done playing. Ling Han raised his fist, wanting to send the other party out of the Great Formation. However, after thinking for a moment, his fist did not land. Instead, a strange smile appeared on his face. The man couldn't help but have goosebumps all over his body. Looking at this smile made him feel a terrifying fear in his heart. He couldn't help but ask, "What are you trying to do?" Hee hee. Ling Han chuckled and began to peel off the man's clothes. No, no, no. The man was terrified. What was going on? Could it be that Ling Han had some special fetish? What are you screaming for? It's not like you're going to lose a piece of flesh. Ling Han snickered a few times and stripped the man of all his clothes. The man only felt cool wind blowing against his buttocks as he thought of the kind of forbidden love that had once prevailed 100 years ago. He couldn't help but shiver in fear. Could it be that Ling Han had vile intentions about his A****? No! He covered his, but with both hands, as if he would rather die than submit. Pong! Ling Han's fist smashed down, smashing towards the man's head. This was a fatal blow, but it was precisely because of this that the Great Formation was activated. Xiao! The man disappeared into thin air. Interesting, Ling Han murmured. Although one of the formation foundations is missing, breaking through the surrounding fog, the functions of the formation have not completely disappeared. Otherwise, in this area, I would be able to kill someone. If I was the designer, I'd use 2 sets of formations overlapping to achieve it. One is the fog formation, and the other is the defensive formation. However, why does this person's sudden disappearance seem like the regulations of space from the Genesis world? Interesting. Formations are really worth studying. I believe that they complement martial arts. Outside the formation, Shua, a white figure flashed and appeared in the plaza. Another person has been eliminated. Pfft, what's going on? Everyone was collectively horrified. This naked man was covering his, but while wailing loudly, and he seemed as if he had nothing to live for. What sort of blow has he suffered? This is Yang Fei. He seems to be a 7 Meridians elite. His abilities are definitely not weak. How did he get eliminated so quickly? Pfft, forgive me for being easily amused, but I really can't help it. Why is he stark naked? Even if he was sneak attacked when he was pooping, it shouldn't be like this, right? Everyone was talking animatedly, but they really couldn't guess the situation at that time. After screaming for a while, Yang Fei also sensed that something was wrong. He stopped screaming and looked around. He immediately became so angry that he almost fainted. He was actually stark naked in front of everyone? Look, some people were even pointing at his buttocks, while some female disciples turned their heads away in embarrassment. They wanted to look, but they didn't dare to. It was over. He was really going to become famous in the ancient Dao sect, and such a reputation was enough to make him forget about raising his head in the sect for the next 10 years. He thought about how he would inevitably be pointed at when walking about in the sect in the future. A senior brother would introduce him to his junior brothers and junior sisters who had just entered the sect. This is Yang Fei, the one who revealed his bare buttocks during the audition for the Dao Child position back then. Ling Han. Yang Fei gritted his teeth, his eyes spitting fire with hatred. He naturally knew now that Ling Han didn't have any special fetishes and was just trying to make him suffer a great humiliation. Bastard, I'm going to kill you. Chapter 3122, 3122 being humiliated instead. Chapter 3122, 3122 being humiliated instead. 3122 being humiliated instead. Ling Han naturally did not take it to heart. He had obtained a formation foundation and was in a very good mood. As he whistled, he continued to search for other formation foundations. After dozens of steps, he entered the fog-shrouded area again. Ling Han slowed down. He studied it carefully. This fog had a strange power. He was clearly walking in a straight line, but as he walked, he actually circled back to the original spot. It wasn't that there was an overlap in space, but that his divine sense had unknowingly been affected. If my divine sense is incomparably tenacious, this formation will definitely not be able to interfere with me. At most, it'll just be a fog covering my eyes, Ling Han concluded. Interesting, interesting. As he made a careful assessment, he soon found another spot to start digging. He had experience this time, so he was naturally determined. After digging for about 7 feet, he found the second formation foundations. After taking it away, the fog within a radius of 90 meters instantly dispersed. Ding, ding, ding. He knocked on the 2 formation foundations, producing a crisp sound. This is metal from the ancient era. It doesn't exist in the modern world. But why do I have a feeling that this is even sturdier than earth element iron? Unfortunately, he didn't have a sword with him. Otherwise, he could have used it to slash the item and see which one was sturdier. Just as he was about to leave, he saw someone rushing toward him. Rue Yuanliang. Enemies were really bound to meet on a narrow road. Rue Yuanliang had already neared him and said balefully, "Enemies are really bound to meet on a narrow road." Ling Han shook his head and said, "Do you know that stealing someone's lines is a very bad behavior?" Rue Yuanliang humphed. "You don't know how to repent even on the brink of death. How pathetic." Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "I heard that you were hung and beaten up. I wonder if your injuries have healed?" Rue Yuanliang almost went mad with anger. Wasn't this rubbing his nose in it? Besides, this was all Ling Han's fault. His chest heaved up and down a few times before he forcefully suppressed his anger and said, "Go ahead and talk. When I trample you under my feet, you'll regret angering me." Ling Han spread his hands and said, "It seems like you and those people surnamed Tan were the ones who framed me, and you ended up humiliating yourself instead, right? Why are you blaming me now? You still dare to say it?" Rue Yuanliang roared as he charged over. This really made him feel sullen. He had given Ling Han a Meridian guiding pill for nothing, while he himself had been hung at the gate and gotten whipped. He had completely lost face. He wanted to kill someone. Boom! A fist flew over, bringing with it a terrifying gale. However, Rue Yuanliang revealed a shocked expression. He naturally understood the approximate level of his strength when he attacked. 3,500 kilograms. This was the power of one whose cultivation level had reached the peak of 5 meridians. It was very normal. Ling Han's cultivation was definitely weaker than his, so the Great Formation would lower his cultivation. However, because the disparity was too great, he was still 1 meridian higher than Ling Han. What did that mean? Ling Han's cultivation level should be at 4 meridians. Hiss, a fellow who had been in the sect for less than 2 months had actually cultivated to 4 meridians? However, with so many meridian guiding pills in Ling Han's possession, in addition to the spirit gathering formation, it was not entirely impossible for him to reach 4 meridians in 2 months. Rue Yuanliang was mad with jealousy. He had only eaten 3 meridian guiding fruits. Compared to Ling Han, how wide was this gap? Biased. Sun Jianfeng was really too biased. In that case, Rue Yuanliang would ruthlessly humiliate this fellow and make him lose all face. He would find an opportunity to kill him in the future. In just an instant, so many thoughts crossed Rue Yuanliang's mind. Ling Han smiled faintly. The people of the ancient Dao sect basically cultivated the 4 directional fists, and it was a simplified version at that. In front of him, it was simply full of flaws. Even if he didn't cultivate the demonic monkey fists, with his insight as an ultimate elite, he could easily pick out more than 10 of such flaws. What he had lost was just power. Ling Han kicked out. Pong! His kick arrived first and landed on Rue Yuanliang's chest. Under the powerful impact, Rue Yuanliang was instantly kicked many meters up high before he fell hard on the ground. Rue Yuanliang groaned and laid on the ground, unable to recover. This kick was really too hurtful. He was about to get up, but just as he raised his head, he felt a foot step on his cheek and press him further to the ground. It was naturally Ling Han's. He was so angry that he wanted to vomit blood. He was clearly the one who had suddenly discovered Ling Han and wanted to come over to take revenge, so how could he be thrashed by Ling Han instead? This didn't make sense. How could the other party have seen through the flaw in his punch? Furthermore, his power was so great. Otherwise, he definitely wouldn't have felt so terrible from just taking a kick. Did it feel good? Ling Han asked with a smile. Rue Yuanliang only wanted to kill, but he was being stepped on by Ling Han. What else could he do other than glare at him? He was extremely humiliated. Although he was a live-in son-in-law and was often laughed at behind his back, who wouldn't respectfully call him young Master Rue in front of him? How humiliating. Hee hee. Ling Han chuckled and began to peel off Rue Yuanliang's clothes too. What are you trying to do? Rue Yuanliang asked in shock. It was indeed painful previously, and it made him feel ashamed. However, compared to taking off his pants, it had become a small matter. Asterisk, 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 Ling Han said viciously. Rue Yuanliang almost fainted from fright. How could he have thought that Ling Han actually had such a fetish? This great formation prohibited killing, but there didn't seem to be anything forbidden about being, right? He was scared to death. If he was really, would the Qi clan still acknowledge him as their son-in-law? He was finally afraid, and screamed repeatedly, "No!" Ling Han snickered. He paid no attention to it, and continued to strip him. Although Rue Yuanliang resisted desperately, how was he capable of resisting? Soon, he was stripped naked. "No!" Rue Yuanliang screamed miserably like Yang Fei. This was the effect that Ling Han wanted. Peng! He threw a punch at Rue Yuanliang's head. At this moment, the Great Formation immediately took effect and sent Rue Yuanliang out. Thus, the people outside the formation were fortunate enough to see another naked man. That's Rue Yuanliang. Look at how miserable he looks. Could it be that he was too? Heavens, could it be that there's a pervert in the sect? Everyone only felt a sense of panic, and their *ses faintly hurt at the thought. It's over. Rue Yuanliang has embarrassed himself in public like this. I reckon that the Qi clan will never want this son-in-law again. That's for sure. That young lady from the Qi clan is famous for being, flirtatious. She could simply go with another man. How could she accept a husband who had bared his buttocks in public? Senior brother Rue is really spectacular in some aspects. No wonder he charmed Miss Qi. Rue Yuanliang heard all of this, and his hands couldn't help but clench tightly. Although Ling Han didn't kill him and didn't even severely injure him, he knew that all that he possessed had already been destroyed by Ling Han. He swore in his heart that no matter what price he had to pay, he would kill Ling Han. Then, he finally shed tears of humiliation. Chapter 31:23, 31:23 Battling Li Changdan. Chapter 31:23, 31:23 Battling Li Changdan. 31:23 Battling Li Changdan. Ling Han walked into the fog and continued to search for the formation foundations. Since he had already found two, finding the third one was naturally not a problem. Very quickly, Ling Han located it. He dug 7 feet into the ground and obtained the third formation foundations. I can't dig anymore. Ling Han sighed. It wasn't that he didn't have enough time, but that the 3 formation foundations were already very obvious. They had stretched his clothes so much that the latter were nearly bursting at the seams, and thus it was impossible for him to hold a 4th one. I'll have to come back and dig for them later. Ling Han was still thinking about it. This formation ought to be very high level, being capable of forcibly bringing down the cultivation level of Meridian opening tier to almost the same level. It would also be very practical in battle. If I can simplify it and set it up at any time, whom would I be afraid of in a battle of the same level? He began to look for an exit. He didn't want Li Changdan to be lucky and walk out first. Here, turn 3 steps to the left. Here, take 2 steps back. The fog continued to dissipate in front of him. Standing at a special node, he could clearly see the entire picture. Ling Han was astounded. He really couldn't underestimate Li Changdan. This guy had actually walked more than half of the way. If nothing had changed, he should be able to walk out of the formation in another 2 hours. I'll fight you. Ling Han increased his speed. This wouldn't allow him to walk in a straight line, and the formation would unknowingly affect his divine sense. Unless his divine sense was extremely powerful, he wouldn't be able to ignore the effects of the formations. Right now, he could only follow the rules of the formations obediently. The distance between the two was rapidly closing, but it was only after half an hour that Ling Han managed to reduce the distance to under 90 meters. Due to the fog, Li Changdan did not notice Ling Han's approach. He was still focused on exploring the path ahead. As he was close enough, Ling Han discovered that there was something faintly glowing under Li Changdan's neck. With a flash, the fog would be pushed back a little, and then he took the opportunity to take a few steps forward. Although the speed wasn't fast, it was stable, and there was no need to take the wrong path. This guy has a treasure that can unravel formations, Ling Han said. However, this one should only be able to reduce the power of the formations by a little. Otherwise, he completely could have taken large strides and directly walked out. No wonder this guy can take the lead. Ling Han walked forward, but as soon as he left that special node, Li Changdan's figure immediately disappeared. It didn't matter. After he took a few steps, Li Changdan immediately appeared before his eyes again. At 60 meters, 30 meters, and 15 meters, the distance between the two of them was already getting very close. Li Changdan suddenly stopped in his tracks. He felt that something was slightly amiss. He stopped moving, and it looked like he was listening around. Was anyone approaching? Impossible. He had a rare treasure that he had obtained from exploring an ancient site. How could he believe that someone could catch up to him now? Could it be a sniper that the formation had manifested? This wasn't impossible. He had explored ancient sites before, and knew that some formations could materialize energy and transform it into a humanoid or ferocious beast form to kill those who entered. He didn't dare to be careless, and immediately put up his guard. The fog billowed. A long time later, a black shadow emerged from the fog and approached him continuously. However, due to the fog, he couldn't see the other party's appearance clearly. The object of energy was fast approaching. Li Changdan had already channeled his power, ready to unleash an attack of 9 Meridians at any moment. The fog rose again, and the figure of the person finally became clear. Disbelief instantly appeared on Li Changdan's face, and he blurted out, "Ling Han." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Senior brother Li seems to be very surprised." Li Changdan was extremely shrewd, and the shock on his face slowly disappeared. He took a deep breath and said, as expected of someone birthed from the divine stone, born with special ability. He had relied on a rare treasure to reach this place, but Ling Han was actually able to catch up to him. Was there any other reason besides obtaining some sort of ability from the divine stone? Born with special ability. Ling Han thought for a moment. This could also be counted as so. He possessed the secret code of the entire Genesis world, which equipped him with extremely strong luck and affinity, as well as special comprehension abilities in alchemy and formations. Senior brother Li, shouldn't we settle the score between us? Li Changdan remained calm and even looked surprised. Junior brother, what are you talking about? It's just the two of us, and you still want to pretend? Ling Han said with a smile. Wasn't this guy a little too careful? Oh. He nodded. Senior brother is worried that I have a recording device on me. If I accidentally record your voice, it will expose your true colors and destroy your perfect image, right? Li Changdan shook his head with a pained expression. Junior brother, you're really thinking too much. Fine. I can't be bothered to expose your hypocrisy. Relatively speaking, I'd rather give you a good beating to vent my anger, Ling Han said. Junior brother, you seem to have a lot of misunderstandings about me. Li Changdan sighed. Come and fight. Ling Han was too lazy to waste his breath. He had always used violence to make others submit. Xiao, he shot forward like an arrow, and the fog surged. He was like a fairy from the heavens. Li Changdan was naturally unafraid of the challenge. The corners of his lips curled in a cold smile. Didn't Ling Han know that he, Li Changdan, was an outstanding talent among the younger generation of the ancient Dao sect? In a battle of the same levels, he was the true invincible one. He casually struck out with his palm. It appeared to be a light strike, but it actually carried supreme power. This was the 4-splitting snowflake palm, which he had obtained from an ancient site. Its power was slightly inferior to that of the real 4-directional fists, but because he had only learned one style of the 4-directional fists, it was definitely not as useful as this palm technique. With this palm strike, he was going to make Ling Han suffer. Ling Han did not retreat, and directly took the attack head-on. Pong! The two of them clashed, and a force as high as 5,000 kilograms surged, causing the surrounding fog to rapidly swirl. Tong, tong, tong. Ling Han took 9 consecutive steps back, and Li Changdan also took 3 consecutive steps back. Both sides took a total of 12 steps back, and both of them instantly disappeared into the fog, making it difficult to see each other's figures. Ling Han gave a shake of his hand. Li Changdan really lived up to his reputation. Despite his cultivation level being suppressed to 5 meridians, he actually still had the power to suppress Ling Han. He couldn't be underestimated. However, Ling Han's fighting spirit flared instead. To constantly trample on trash like Yang Fei and Rue Yuanliang really did not give him a sense of accomplishment. "Junior brother, you're really amazing," Li Changdan said with a smile, but his heart was filled with shock. Others might not know, but he knew very well that because of the rare treasure hanging around his neck, he could slightly loosen the formation's suppression on him. Thus, he could move forward slowly but firmly. On the other hand, the suppression of his cultivation level was weaker than for others. Others could only be higher by 1 meridian, but he was close to 2. He was a prodigy to begin with, and his battle prowess was invincible among those of the same cultivation level. Further, there was the suppression caused by the disparity in power to about 2 meridians, so who could be his match? Chapter 31-24, 31-24 Treasure Seizing. Chapter 31-24, 31-24 Treasure Seizing. 31-24 Treasure Seizing. Li Changdan had originally thought that he was invincible among the younger generation, but after exchanging a blow with Ling Han, tempestuous waves surged in his heart. In terms of power, Ling Han was only slightly inferior to him, but the power of Ling Han's fist was incomparably condensed. This punch caused his palm to hurt and even feel slightly numb. How was this possible? With the suppression by nearly 2 meridians of cultivation, coupled with the fact that he was already stronger than most people, his current strength was around 6,000 Ki from the suppression of his cultivation level. It could be seen that Ling Han's cultivation level should be at 4 meridians. The power of the 4 meridians was only about 1,750 kilograms, yet Ling Han's strength was as high as 5,000 kilograms. How terrifying was this? Hiss! Li Changdan felt numb with shock, while at the same time, boundless killing intent surged within him. Such a person had to be eliminated. Otherwise, Li Changdan wouldn't be able to eat or sleep in peace. "Junior brother Ling, let me teach you how to fight." He charged over and struck out with his palm. It appeared to be a light strike, but actually carried a strong sound of rushing wind, indicating that the destructive power of this palm strike was actually very terrifying. He had a rare treasure that could negate the suppression of the formations within a short range. Thus, he broke through the fog and charged murderously towards Ling Han. It was only a mere 12 steps. A raging fighting spirit appeared on Ling Han's face as he charged forward. Xiao, his figure was agile like a highly spirited monkey. This was indeed the demonic monkey fists. Li Changdan's palm landed on thin air. Ling Han's fist smashed over from an extremely tricky angle, completely exceeding his expectations. This was not the 4-directional fists. Pong! Just as this thought flashed through his mind, he was punched in the left shoulder. A piercing pain assaulted him, causing him to grunt and stagger back. This was only because he had dodged in time. Otherwise, this punch would have landed on his chest. What a terrifying fist technique! Why was it even more powerful than the style of 4-directional fists that he had learned? What fist technique is this? He couldn't hide his shock. Dog fist. Ling Han laughed and once again closed in, throwing a punch. This demonic monkey fist was not only agile, but also extremely domineering. Ling Han seemed to have transformed into a domineering, rash demonic monkey, exuding boundless savageness. His punches were tricky and domineering, causing Li Changdan to be hit repeatedly. He was in extreme pain. Li Changdan had cultivated up to 9 meridians, so his physique was naturally very powerful. However, after being struck by Ling Han's barrage of attacks, he was still in extreme pain. After all, the force of over 5,000 kilograms had smashed into him, causing him to be in extreme pain. He was no longer as calm as before, and his neat hair had become disheveled. He no longer had the slightest trace of elegance. This top genius of the ancient Dao sect was actually so weak. It wasn't that Li Changdan was too weak, but that Ling Han was too freakish. In this era, who had obtained an inheritance of cultivation technique? Perhaps there was some, but it was definitely pitifully little. At the very least, Li Changdan didn't have it. Meanwhile, with the tempering from the brother monkey cultivation technique, Ling Han's power was incomparably pure. He also possessed 5,000 kilograms of power, but his destructive power was greater than others. Coupled with the demonic monkey fists, which might be a secret technique from the golden age of ancient martial arts, it naturally far surpassed the four-directional fists and the four-splitting snowflake palm. Furthermore, Ling Han's state of mind as an ultimate elite was something that Li Changdan could never compare to. With so many factors added together, even if Li Changdan had the cultivation level advantage by 2 meridians, it would be useless. He could only passively take a beating. However, compared to Rui Yuanliang, he was much more durable. At the very least, he could still hold on for now, unlike Rui Yuanliang, who had been defeated with just a kick from Ling Han. Li Changdan was no match for Ling Han and had the intention to retreat. If he continued to fight, he would only be humiliating himself. As long as he left this great formation, he would have a crushing advantage in terms of power and would definitely be able to find an opportunity to eliminate Ling Han. He had to get rid of him. This guy was too freakish. He pretended to make a move before he turned to run. Pong! He unleashed his power and kicked out at an extremely fast speed. Right now, none of them had mastered any movement techniques, so speed was basically dependent on power. With this burst of power, he instantly disappeared into the fog. However, Ling Han was not nervous at all, nor did he chase after them. Instead, he clasped his hands behind his back and counted 1, 2, 3. He had only counted to 9 when he saw a black shadow coming toward him. Li Changdan, you're back? Ling Han laughed loudly, and his right fist had already struck out. This was a psychedelic great formation. Although Li Changdan possessed a rare treasure that could break through the formation with certain limitations, that rare treasure wouldn't be able to take effect in time when he was running so quickly just now. Thus, even though he was clearly walking forward, he had actually made a detour and ran right in front of Ling Han. What? Li Changdan's pupils involuntarily dilated, but he was a prodigy after all. He abruptly bent over and barely dodged the punch. Pong! Ling Han kicked out, hitting right between Li Changdan's legs. Oh! Li Changdan had already cultivated his physical body to an extremely powerful state, yet no matter how much he cultivated, he couldn't cultivate that place as well. His entire body bowed, and his face turned so pale that there was no trace of blood circulation. He swayed back and forth on his tiptoes, as if a mere light push would cause him to tip over and fall to the ground. Ling Han shook his head. If Li Changdan was placed in the Genesis world, he would be far from a prodigy. He could only be said to be slightly stronger than ordinary people. This world had just started, after all, and there was a limited number of cultivators. Moreover, in such a small place like the ancient Dao sect, it was normal that no true prodigy had appeared. Ling Han instantly felt a sense of boredom. He had originally thought that he could trample on a prodigy, but who would have thought that this one would only be slightly better than mediocrity, disappointing him? Boring. He shook his head. Li Changdan really wanted to curse. You beat him up so badly, and yet you still said that it was boring. He was the #1 genius of the ancient Dao sect. Having defeated him, how glorious would that be? What a huge humiliation. However, Li Changdan couldn't even open his mouth. Now, he deeply understood what it meant to have a pain in the nuts, and this was really fatal. Ling Han stretched out his hand and tore open Li Changdan's collar with a rip. A purple pendant hung from his chest, and he wore it with a thread. Ling Han reached out and pulled at it. The thread broke, and the pendant fell into his hand. "Our return," Li Changdan barely said, but the words, "it to me," couldn't be uttered at all. Ling Han smiled and said, "Senior brother is really stingy. Isn't it just a pendant carved from a piece of broken wood?" What's our relationship for you to be fussing over this with me? He put his arm around Li Changdan's shoulder, as if they were good friends. Li Changdan reached out with a trembling hand, but the pain coming from his lower body was too intense. He felt as if just stretching out his hand had caused a tug on his balls, and it was so painful that he was about to cry. How was this a pendant carved out of broken wood? It was a rare treasure he had obtained from an ancient site that could suppress formations. Now that ancient sites were appearing one after another in this world, all of them were protected by formations. Thus, how practical was this pendant? It was extremely precious. Chapter 3125, 3125 Dao Child. Chapter 3125, 3125 Dao Child. 3125 Dao Child. Thank you, Senior Brotherly, Ling Han said, as he waved the pendant in his hand before striding off. Our return, Li Changdan tried to speak, but still stuttered. He was completely unable to say the words, "it to me." Senior brother, you're being too petty. How can you ask for the return of something that you've given away? Ling Han didn't even turn his head. He merely laughed loudly and left. This pendant was of great significance. If he snatched it away, it would probably be even more painful than giving Li Changdan a good beating. In fact, it would make him feel even worse than being seen naked too by others. Because in Ling Han's opinion, Li Changdan's personality belonged to the cunning and reserved type. Even if he was humiliated, he could endure it and then wait for an opportunity to take revenge, just like a venomous snake. Therefore, Ling Han only took away the most precious thing of the other party, which would make Li Changdan's heart ache whenever he was to think about it. The fog surged, and it quickly covered Ling Han, disappearing him from Li Changdan's field of vision. Woo! Li Changdan cried like an injured wolf. He had lived for 21 years. Aside from when he was very young, the moment that he started cultivating, he had become a genius that everyone had to look up to. After so many years, he was too used to enjoying the admiration of others. But at this moment, it only took one battle, and all of his glory had vanished into thin air. This let him know that he wasn't as strong as he thought. Ling Han placed the pendant right in front of his eyes and examined it carefully. This pendant was carved out of purple-colored wood. As for what type it was, Ling Han couldn't recognize it. After all, his understanding of this world came from the optical computer, and there was no complete introduction. Moreover, this was most likely a material from the ancient era and had long been extinct. The pendant looked very ancient and yet appeared to be quite ordinary. He really couldn't make out what was so special about it. There were no formation patterns on it, which was beyond Ling Han's expectations. Then how did he break through the fog? Ling Han discovered that holding this pendant did not have much of an effect. Should he wear it around his neck? However, the thread was already broken. So how could he hang it around his neck? This shouldn't be the reason, but rather there was a need to stick it close to the body. Ling Han thought for a moment, wiped the pendant, and then kept it close to his chest. Instantly, the fog in front of him dispersed. As expected, Ling Han pondered whether this was really due to the need to stick it close to one's flesh. Not necessarily. He wasn't an ordinary person, but an existence that had once reigned supreme in a world. Sticking it close to the body, was it so that it could absorb the body's heat, or was it because there was blood circulating in his body? Let's give it a try. Becoming a master through blood bonding is also something quite common. He cut his finger and let the blood drip onto the pendant. Instantly, Ling Han felt his hand tremble slightly, as if something was gushing out of the pendant. It could not be seen, but it was indeed there. The strange thing was that the blood on the pendant was completely absorbed in an instant, as if nothing had happened. Ling Han observed it carefully and discovered that this pendant had become even warmer. Purple chi filled the air, and it looked like a piece of jade. The change in the pendant itself might not be obvious, but one could clearly see that the area of the mist dispelled by the pendant had increased. This meant that the drop of blood was effective, and had indeed strengthened the pendant's effect. Why didn't Li Changdan do that? Blood bonding was a very common occurrence in the small worlds of the Genesis world, ancient realm, or the celestial realm. Why didn't Li Changdan give it a try? Ling Han thought for a moment and couldn't help but smile. It was common in the Genesis world, but here, who would let himself bleed for no reason? After all, the martial arts here had just begun to rise, and everything was still in a state of ignorance. It didn't matter. It was now in his hands anyway. It was none of his business if Li Changdan didn't make any progress in his study of it. Ling Han strode forward. The pendant was working, dispelling the fog within a few feet of him. Although this wasn't much, it was enough for Ling Han because he had a considerable understanding of formations to begin with. Soon, he arrived at the exit. "Will many people be shocked to see that I'm the first to walk out?" he muttered, but his footsteps did not slow down at all. After a few dozen steps, he walked out of the great formation. Hypocrite was waiting at the exit. When she saw someone come out, she subconsciously thought that it was Li Changdan, so she hurriedly pounced over like a bird returning to the forest. Changdan. However, she was immediately surprised to discover that this person was not Li Changdan, but the brat who had humiliated her at her birthday banquet. It was because of Ling Han that she was forced to apologize to a lowly maid. Every time she thought of it, she felt humiliated. Although Hypocrite had already managed to stop in time, Ling Han still moved to the side as a gesture of giving way. It was clear that he despised her attitude. Hypocrite was already extremely displeased, and now she was almost angered to death. "Senior sister, I heard that you and senior brother Lair are about to get engaged. Your behavior isn't too good, right?" Ling Han purposely acted embarrassed, as if Hypocrite really wanted to throw herself into his arms just now. Hypocrite was stunned, and then she realized that Ling Han was teasing her, which caused her to almost lose control. However, she still suppressed the anger in her heart and said in a low voice, "Why did you come out? Where's senior brotherly?" Ling Han chuckled and said, "I think I saw that senior brotherly. Seeing that a junior sister was in trouble and he wanted to help her, I came over first." How was this possible? Of course, Hypocrite wouldn't believe it. Li Changdan knew what this competition meant. At such an important moment, how could he be so ignorant? "You're talking nonsense," she snapped. "Believe it or not, it's up to you." Ling Han ignored her. Sun Jianfeng and the other elders of the sect had already walked over, and so did the other disciples of the sect. All of them had expressions like having seen a ghost. It was actually Ling Han who was the first to walk out of the Great Formation and win first place in the audition. In other words, he was the Dao Child of ancient Dao sect. Hypocrite was first shocked, and then in disbelief. In the end, he calmed down, while his face turned extremely gloomy. He was too disappointed. In order to pressure Sun Jianfeng, he had paid a huge price to get Tanjing, Laofeng, and Chiwu to agree to help him, creating an excellent opportunity for Li Changdan. In his opinion, who could be Li Changdan's match under such conditions? Yet it just so happened that the first person to walk out of the ancient formation was actually Ling Han. In other words, not only had Hypocrite paid such a great price for nothing, he even allowed Ling Han to ascend the position and become the ancient Dao sect's Dao Child, as well as the next sect master. "Trash, Li Changdan, this trash." Sun Jianfeng laughed loudly. The reason why he had agreed to confirm the candidates for the Dao Child in advance and used such a method was because he had had full confidence in Ling Han. As expected, Ling Han did not disappoint him. "I hereby announce that Ling Han is the Dao Child of the ancient Dao sect," Sun Jianfeng announced to everyone as he turned around. Chapter 3126, 3126 Mission. Chapter 3126, 3126 Mission. 3126 Mission. After becoming the Dao Child of the ancient Dao sect, the treatment received by Ling Han immediately improved by leaps and bounds. First of all, his residence had been shifted. He had moved from the foot of the mountain to the foothills closer to the mountain. Although Sun Jianfeng had established the ancient Dao sect, in reality, he had only discovered a fifth scripture of the ancient Dao sect in this place. He hadn't obtained the true inheritance of the ancient Dao sect. Moreover, upon the transformation of the heaven and earth, only this small portion of the ancient Dao sect had been revealed. Most of the structures were still buried in the mountains. It wasn't that the ancient Dao sect didn't want to excavate them, but there were formations sealing them off. No one had the ability to do so. However, after moving some positions, Ling Han discovered that there were some unknown trees planted around the courtyard. Normally, there was nothing unusual about them, but when he cultivated in the morning, he could gather the power of heaven and earth, making a certain kind of mystical power in the courtyard even more abundant. Therefore, if he cultivated here, his efficiency would increase by about 20% in comparison to his original residence. Although it was only 20%, with constant cultivation for a period of time, the results would be staggering. No wonder Changdan was keen on the position of Dao Child. Just this benefit alone was already extremely astonishing. In addition, Ling Han still had a quota of 100 jade seeds per month, while as an ordinary disciple previously, he had only had 1 jade seed per month. Furthermore, the Dao Child could learn 3 styles of the true 4-directional fists. The true 4-directional fist was extremely powerful. If it was suddenly used in battle, it was very likely to reverse the situation. Of course, this was under the condition that the strength of both sides was similar. Otherwise, if the difference in cultivation level was too great, not to mention the 3 moves, even using all of them would be useless. Ling Han was no longer interested in the 4-directional fists, but he also needed a secret weapon and a trump card. Thus, he decided not to use the demonic monkey fists unless he was unable to defeat his opponent. He spent some time practicing the 4-directional fists. With his comprehension ability of someone who used to be a heavenly venerate, this was naturally not difficult to understand, and he quickly mastered it. In comparison, this set of fist techniques was truly simple. Once one understood it thoroughly, one would understand it thoroughly. It wasn't like the demonic monkey fists, which was full of changes, and one would gain a new comprehension every time one cultivated it. The two were on completely different levels. That was true. This area could only be considered the periphery of the true ancient Dao sect. How good could the fist scriptures obtained here be? There wasn't even a cultivation technique. Ling Han nodded to himself. No cultivation techniques had appeared in this world yet. Perhaps there were some, but they were definitely pitifully few. However, as the Great Era advanced, a large number of cultivation techniques might appear one day. At that time, it would be difficult to surpass the people who were already in the lead. Thus, now was the best time for him to quickly catch up to others. Ling Han did not believe that he would lose to anyone in terms of cultivation with his ability when he reached the peak stage of Meridian opening. After Sun Jianfeng taught him the 3 styles of the 4-directional fists, he was still waiting for Ling Han to ask him if there was anything he didn't understand. However, after waiting for a long time, he still didn't see Ling Han coming over, which caused him to feel puzzled. Could it be that this Dao Child's comprehension had fallen to rock bottom? After so many days, he still couldn't comprehend a little of these 3 styles of 4-directional fists. He called Ling Han over to inquire about his progress. "How's your fist training going?" he asked. "It's all right." Ling Han was very humble. "What do you mean it's all right?" Sun Jianfeng was annoyed, but when he thought of Ling Han's freakishness from before, he couldn't help but restrain himself and said, "Show me, no matter how much you've grasped." "All right." Ling Han began to practice the 3 styles of the 4-directional fists. The corners of Sun Jianfeng's mouth immediately began to twitch. So this was the reason why Ling Han had never looked for him. Damn it, he had encountered a monster who had actually completely learned it. Even with his cultivation that had been immersed in this set of fist techniques for over 100 years, he was still unable to find the slightest flaw in Ling Han's fist technique. Sigh, some people were really born for martial arts. That was all he could think. "Go and cultivate diligently. Don't slack off," he instructed. Yes. Ling Han left and cultivated with all his might in his residence. Young master! Young master! Huan Shui ran over. Since Ling Han had moved here, she had also come along, and continued to be Ling Han's little maid. This made everyone sigh ruefully. At first, they had thought that she had been extremely silly for giving up her identity as a disciple of the ancient Dao sect and insisting on being a maidservant. However, Looking at it now, she could also cultivate in a place that was meant to be used by the Dao Child. How many people were envious of her? What's wrong? Ling Han asked with a smile. Li Changdan and He Miaoyin's engagement has been cancelled, she announced the big news. Ling Han gave an O, not finding it strange at all. The He family valued Li Changdan's potential and thought that he could lead the He clan to greater heights in the future. However, Li Changdan actually lost in the Dao Child competition. Naturally, this made the He clan change their mind. However, Ling Han felt that the He clan was a little short-sighted. Although Li Changdan had lost his position as the Dao Child, he could still be considered a talent. He still had a promising future. Of course, if Li Changdan didn't know what was good for him and insisted on making Ling Han his enemy, then his future would be a dead end, and the He clan's decision wouldn't be wrong. Let's see how Li Changdan makes his choice. How could Li Changdan give up? In his opinion, that pendant was too important. He had gone through countless dangers to obtain it, and it had also helped him obtain many opportunities. This was a precious treasure, and it was incomparably important. Thus, he naturally had to seek its return from Ling Han. Ling Han directly gave him the cold shoulder. First, Li Changdan had sent Zhang Tongfeng to lure him into depravity, and then provoke the hatred of Tan Gaobua and the others to target him. How could Li Changdan not compensate him with something? This was the residence of the Dao Child. Who would dare to barge in? Li Changdan didn't dare to act recklessly. He could only run back angrily. After this battle, Li Changdan's prestige in the ancient Dao sect had plummeted to rock bottom. Now, everyone was discussing how long it would take for Ling Han to completely surpass this once proud prodigy. Ling Han knew that Li Changdan was probably going to take the risk. He didn't dare to make a move in the ancient Dao sect, and even if he did, it would be impossible for him to do so. This was because Ling Han had already buried the 3 formation foundations around his residence, and it was actually effective. He had turned this place into a small-scale psychedelic formation. While it did not suppress his cultivation level, this was enough. Ling Han practiced cultivation techniques and fist techniques every day, and spent the rest of his time studying formations. In this world, alchemy was tied to formations. Because he had changed to a better place to cultivate, Ling Han's advancement was naturally much faster. 2 months later, he cultivated to the peak of the 5 meridians. Subsequently, he naturally sensed the 6th meridian easily. He was called over by Sun Jianfeng again. "I have a mission for you," Sun Jianfeng said. "What mission?" "Go to the Jade Dragon Mine and investigate the situation there." "Jade Dragon Mine?" Sun Jian explained to him, and only then did Ling Han realize that the fact that the ancient Dao sect had so many jade seeds was because they were actually all mined. These mines were also the foundation for a sect to continue developing. The Jade Dragon Mine belonged to the ancient Dao sect, and it was located on the other side of Hyping Mountain. Because there were no other forces nearby, there were no elites stationed to guard this mine. But now, the Jade Dragon Mine hadn't sent any jade seeds for half a month. Chapter 3127, 3127 Investigating the Mine. Chapter 3127, 3127 Investigating the Mine. 3127 Investigating the Mine. Ordinarily, the Jade Dragon Mine would send a batch of jade seeds every 10 days. This was the sect's greatest source of income. Then, these jade seeds would be distributed to every disciple. But now, half a month had passed, and the latest batch of jade seeds had yet to be sent over. This naturally attracted Sun Jianfeng's attention. He had thought that it was only because of the weather that they had been delayed for a day or two, but the expected delivery had already exceeded the limit by 5 days. This wasn't right. Sending Ling Han instead of an elder was to establish Ling Han's prestige as a Dao Child. Only by doing more things could one gain prestige and be trusted. "This is a talisman weapon." Sun Jian handed Ling Han a piece of paper that was suffused with a yellow hue and exuded a hint of antiquity. "If you really encounter great danger, drip your blood on this and throw it out." Talisman weapon? Ling Han took the yellow paper and was slightly surprised. There was such a thing in the Genesis world as well. A great elite would attach a portion of their battle prowess to a tool through a special method. When thrown out against an enemy, it could unleash a terrifying might. However, it was not triggered by blood, but by divine intent. Sun Jianfeng could actually make talisman weapons? This was passed down from ancient times. I also found it in the ruins of the ancient Dao sect, Sun Jianfeng explained. There aren't many such talisman weapons. Furthermore, because it has been too long, its power should have been weakened. It can only attack with the power of 10 meridians. What did 10 meridians mean? Ability to release mystical power. Therefore, even though it was just a piece of paper, it could unleash great power. Sun Jianfeng still treasured Ling Han very much. He had bestowed him with a 10 meridians level talisman weapon. So if Ling Han went to a small mine to investigate the situation, even he should not have any problems. All right, I'll set off immediately. Ling Han nodded. He was currently in the early stage of 6 meridians, but his power had already reached 8,500 kilograms, which was comparable to the early stage of 8 meridians. Coupled with the demonic monkey fists, he would just barely be able to put up a fight against Li Changdan if they were to meet in battle, even without the suppression of his cultivation level. Therefore, with the addition of a talisman weapon, he was full of confidence. Go, be careful. Sun Jianfeng waved his hand. Ling Han returned to his residence and made some slight adjustments. He rejected the little handmaiden's suggestion to accompany him, carried his long sword, and left the mountain. With Li Changdan's many years of connections, even if his reputation had plummeted as the saying went, a centipede dies, but never falls down, was still capable of some feats. He could not be underestimated. This guy wouldn't give up such a good opportunity, right? 6 meridians to fight against 9 meridians, and he was at the peak stage of 9 meridians at that. Ling Han did not think that he had any chance of winning, unless he threw out the talisman weapon. However, this was the last resort. Ling Han thought for a moment, and then began to take a roundabout route, weaving through the mountain forests and choosing all the paths that no one would take. Now that he had more than 5,000 kilograms of strength, it was naturally much easier for him to cross mountains and ridges than before. After spending some effort, he arrived near the Jade Dragon mine 2 days later. Because of this mine, a village had been built here. The miners usually ate and lived here, and they would only return to the town once in a while. Of course, the miners here were all ordinary people. Only 13 supervisors were disciples of the ancient Dao sect, and one of them was the leader. His cultivation level was 8 meridians, and his abilities were not considered weak. With him here, he could even kill a ferocious tiger with a single punch. Ling Han arrived at the village and immediately felt that something was amiss. Even though it was afternoon, and the miners were supposed to be working in the cave, the entire village was as quiet as a ghostly village, which naturally made him feel that something was amiss. Where did everyone go? The miners weren't around, but there had to be someone who would start a fire and cook. As Ling Han walked through the village, his long sword was already in his hand. Although he had yet to grasp any sword techniques, it was still better to hold a sword in this sort of situation. Whoosh! A mountain breeze blew over. It was clearly September, but there was actually a chilling feeling to it. Ling Han's footsteps were very light. He walked from the entrance of the village to the back and didn't discover a single person. He also observed carefully, but didn't find any traces of a fight. It seemed that the people here had run away on their own, so nobody caused any damage. Otherwise, even if they encountered a super elite, it would not be so peaceful, right? Ling Han started from the end of the village, searching house by house. Empty, empty, empty. When he was about to reach the village entrance, he finally found a clue in one of the houses. In fact, he didn't know if it was a clue or not, but it was a scale the size of a fingernail. Judging from its shape, it was impossible to determine which animal it had fallen off. The other clue was that it had a fishy smell. Although it was only a scale, the smell it emitted was incomparably dense. It was also because Ling Han had detected this fishy smell that he had gone to look for the source of the fishy smell, which was why he had found this scale. Could it be that a ferocious creature had appeared and eaten all the villagers here? Was that possible? There were 13 ancient Dao sect disciples here. The strongest one even had the cultivation level of 8 meridians. What kind of ferocious creature could not be defeated by them? In fact, not a single person survived. In that case, such a ferocious creature had to be at least 9 meridians, or in fact 10 meridians. Ling Han frowned. If such a ferocious creature really appeared, then if he was to continue investigating deeper, it would pose a threat to his life. He heard light footsteps. Had a survivor returned? Ling Han walked out of the door. Shua, a cold light flashed past, slashing towards his head. This attack was fast and ruthless, and its power was even more vigorous. In such a strange place, Ling Han naturally would not be careless. He had long been prepared to face danger, and thus he immediately parried the attack with the long sword in his hand. Ding! A crisp sound rang out, and he felt his right hand go slightly numb. However, this attack was also neutralized by him. But at this moment, another cold light shot over. There was more than one person who made a move. Ling Han's feet shifted, and he dodged this attack. His entire body felt a bit of pain. After the exchange of blows, he was still able to forcefully make such a change despite the fact that his power was surging. This was truly too much. However, the third attack came as well. Ling Han had used up all his power, and it was impossible for his body to change directions again. How could he neutralize this attack? Nothing was impossible. Ling Han channeled the brother monkey cultivation technique, and the power in his meridians once again channeled inconceivably, providing him with an endless supply of power. With a great flip, he finally dodged the third attack. There was no fourth attack. 3 people appeared in front of Ling Han. Rue Yuanliang, Yang Fei, and Li Changdan. The 3 of them actually joined forces. Ling Han thought for a moment and gave an O in his heart. Yang Fei and Rue Yuanliang had been humiliated badly enough by him during the Dao Child selection, while Li Changdan had lost his position as the Dao Child and had not been able to become the son-in-law of the He clan because of this. Thus, the 3 of them hit it off right away. Haha, this Li Changdan was cautious indeed. He was clearly at the level of 9 meridians, but he didn't choose to act alone. Chapter 3128, 3128 Pursuit. Chapter 3128, 3128 Pursuit. 3128 Pursuit. Li Changdan and the other 2 were also very surprised. They had launched a sneak attack, had an advantage in numbers, and also had the advantage of cultivation level, yet they were still unable to kill Ling Han. What kind of luck did this kid have? You're really lucky, Rue Yuanliang said balefully. Don't waste your breath on him. Kill him. Yang Fei's eyes shot out a cold light. He really hated Ling Han to death. Ling Han had caused him to show his buttocks in public, making him not even dare to show his face in public. Ling Han shook his head and said, "You guys really have schemed seriously. You actually followed me all the way here. Ling Han, today will be the day you die. This place will be the place where your bones are buried." Rue Yuanliang laughed coldly and took the lead to launch an attack. He brandished a large saber that shone with a cold light in his hand and slashed it towards Ling Han's neck. The power of his 8 meridians surged, and his battle prowess wasn't weak at all. Yang Fei also brandished his sword, slashing towards Ling Han. Li Changdan didn't make a move. He was like a sinister viper, looking for the best opportunity to strike. His caution was reasonable. Otherwise, Ling Han would have directly taken out that talisman weapon. With the power of the 10 meridians erupting, so what if the 3 of them joined forces? Perhaps they would be instantly killed. Ling Han also took out his longsword. Ding, 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 ding. He continuously clashed with Rue Yuanliang and Yang Fei. His current strength was not much weaker than Rue Yuanliang's. Compared to Yang Fei, he was actually more superior. Thus, he was not at a disadvantage in a 1-on-2 battle. However, he wasn't in the 10 meridians yet, so he couldn't release his power, and he couldn't attack at close range when wielding a sharp weapon. Thus, he couldn't unleash the power of the demonic monkey fists. Otherwise, with the support of his left hand using the demonic monkey fists, his battle prowess would naturally be even stronger. Even so, this was shocking enough. During the selection, Ling Han had relied on the suppression of the ancient formation to defeat Yang Fei and Rue Yuanliang. But now, without the slightest bit of cultivation level suppression, he was still only at a slight disadvantage in a 1 versus 2 confrontation. He was simply freakish. Li Changdan's expression turned ugly. Although it was easy to cultivate at a lower cultivation level, he was not like Ling Han, who had only used a few short months to reach a height that others could only reach in a few years. He was hesitating whether he should make a move. "Senior brother Li, what are you hesitating for?" Yang Fei shouted. "Let's attack together and kill this guy." "Li Changdan, this was your idea. Why are you hesitating now that things have come to this?" Rue Yuanliang also said. If they did not have Li Changdan's powerful suppression, it would be impossible for him and Yang Fei to kill Ling Han. If he couldn't win, wouldn't he run? Li Changdan was different from these two. He had almost become the Dao Child, so he naturally had a better understanding of martial arts. Sun Jianfeng had many rare treasures in his possession. This time, he had sent Ling Han out alone. Would he not bestow 1 or 2 to him so he could protect himself? In any case, Li Changdan didn't believe that Ling Han had not been given anything. Thus, he was worried that if he couldn't kill Ling Han, then allowing Ling Han to take out a rare treasure, it would have unfathomable consequences. Putting everything else aside, as long as Ling Han could escape to the sect, then Li Changdan would be charged with murdering the Dao Child and would definitely die. Thus, today he would either have to kill Ling Han, or he would have to escape from the sect and wander the world. He had no choice. He had to take a gamble. Otherwise, the glory that belonged to him would never return. "All right." Li Changdan nodded, but took a few steps back. He picked up a palm-sized rock from the ground and threw it at Ling Han. Force couldn't be released, but power could be thrown out through a weapon. Xiao, the power of a peak 9 Meridians cultivator was as high as 15,000 kilograms. In addition, Li Changdan was stronger than an ordinary 9 Meridians cultivator. This power reached 17,500 kilograms. How terrifying would the destructive power be when enveloped around a rock that was thrown out? Even if it couldn't be perfectly unleashed, it was still more than 10,000 kilograms. This power far exceeded Ling Han's limits. If he was hit by it, Ling Han would definitely be sent flying. Ling Han dodged to the side, dodging the stone's attack. However, in order to dodge this attack, he was also almost struck by Rue Yuanliang's large saber and broke out in a cold sweat. How could it be a joke when a 9 Meridians attacked? Although Rue Yuanliang and Yang Fei were very dissatisfied with Li Changdan's actions, the latter still seriously affected Ling Han, after all. Thus, they didn't say anything else. As long as they could kill Ling Han, it would be fine. Even if it took a longer time, so be it. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. Li Changdan continuously threw rocks. He was abnormally accurate, forcing Ling Han to divert a large portion of his attention to cope with it. Furthermore, Ling Han had to dodge and could not use his weapon to meet the attack. The difference in power was too great, and it was possible that a single strike would cause his long sword to slip from his hand. However, this way, Rue Yuanliang's power suddenly increased, and even Yang Fei's attack became something that couldn't be ignored. This was not going anywhere. Ling Han frowned slightly. Could it be that he had to immediately use that talisman weapon? The problem was that the talisman weapon couldn't be channeled for a long time. Right now, Li Changdan was just throwing stones at the periphery. It would be too easy for him to escape. At that time, he only needed to wait for the talisman weapon to run out of energy, and he would be able to charge his way back. At that time, there would really be no way out for Ling Han. Xiao. Another rock smashed over with a whistling wind. This one was so fast that it was already close to the speed of sound, emitting a sonic boom. As it passed, the sound compressed and materialized. Go! Ling Han let out a long cry and suddenly charged out of the battle, exerting all his strength to run. Where do you think you're going? Yang Fei and Rue Yuanliang chased after him. Although Li Changdan also started to chase after him, he still maintained a distance. Xiao, a rock smashed over, catching up to Ling Han at subsonic speeds, directly striking his back. Ling Han dodged to the side, avoiding this attack. However, because of this delay, Yang Fei and Rue Yuanliang had already caught up to him and launched a fierce attack. Fuck! Ling Han cursed in his heart, but there was nothing he could do. A 9 Meridians was too powerful. Just Li Changdan alone was more than what he could match. This result was very normal. It couldn't be helped. He hadn't been able to learn the ancient formation. Otherwise, if he set up a large formation now and pulled everyone's cultivation level to the same level, so what if the 3 of them joined forces? Ling Han continued to run. If they were to start a battle in such an open area, the threat of Li Changdan's stone-throwing attack would be too great. Moreover, this place was like a natural armory, and there were stones everywhere. There was no need to worry that there would be no stones to use. Soon, a pitch-black cave appeared in front of Ling Han, exuding a sinister aura, as if he would never be able to come out after entering. This was the entrance to the Jade Dragon Mine. Ling Han gritted his teeth and sprinted into the cave. If they were in the mine, the power of Li Changdan's stone throwing would be severely limited. Not to mention anything else, the light was so dim. How could his aim be so accurate? Stop him! Li Changdan shouted. However, Rue Yuanliang's and Yang Fei's speed was not higher than Ling Han's. How could they stop them? Li Changdan was begrudging and could only unleash his power. Pong! His speed instantly soared to the extreme, and layers of sound barriers appeared behind him, rapidly closing the distance between him and Ling Han. Ling Han chuckled and took out the Talisman Weapon. Li Changdan immediately stopped. Chapter 3129, 3129 Monster. Chapter 3129, 3129 Monster. 3129 Monster. Li Changdan was knowledgeable. He recognized that this was a talisman weapon. He had seen it before at Higuan's place. If the person who made the talisman weapon was different, the power of the talisman weapon was naturally different. One could imagine that this talisman weapon was definitely a gift from Sun Jianfang, so its power was absolutely astonishing. Therefore, he stopped in time and didn't want to face it head-on. Meanwhile, Ling Han unleashed a burst of power and flew into the mine. Li Changdan. Rue Yuanliang couldn't help but roar furiously. This guy was clearly a 9 Meridians cultivator. As long as he used his full strength, how could Ling Han possibly have the chance to escape? It was this guy who had suggested chasing after Ling Han, but it was also this guy who had been so timid. He really did not know what he was afraid of. Afraid of being charged with killing the Dao Child? But even if Ling Han died in his or Yang Fei's hands, how could Li Changdan stay out of it? They were all in the same boat here. How stupid. How could such a person actually aspire to become the Dao Child? In the mine, the lighting was dark and the terrain was complicated. Thus, Yang Fei and Rue Yuanliang immediately stopped in their tracks. They couldn't give chase recklessly. If they weren't careful, they might lose their lives. Li Changdan said coldly, "Chase after him." Rue Yuanliang looked at Li Changdan and said angrily, "If you had used your full strength, that kid would have died long ago." Yang Fei, on the other hand, was also furious, but did not dare to say anything. He was only from the 7 Meridians and did not have any background. What's the point of saying this now? Li Changdan's gaze was cold. Right now, we need to work together and kill Ling Han. Otherwise, there won't be anything good for us in the sect in the future. Are you still going to be so timid when you meet that kid again? Rue Yuanliang asked. Of course not, Li Changdan said. Good. The 3 of them advanced together and entered the mine. At first, there were no forks in the path inside the mine. They only needed to walk forward. It's so creepy in here. There's a bone-chilling cold. Li Changdan pondered for a moment and said, "This is a mine. It's normal for it to be cold. All right, don't think about such irrelevant things. We only have one goal." However, after walking for a while, a fork appeared in front of them. Which side? Yang Fei asked. There were no footprints left in this mine, so they didn't know which path to take. Don't be anxious. Li Changdan took out a box and opened it. Inside was a jade-colored toad. He placed the toad on the ground. Strangely, This toad actually croaked twice at the passage on the left. Yang Fei and Rue Yuanliang clicked their tongues in wonder. This was really a good thing for tracking. Soon, they encountered another fork in the road. Li Changdan still took out the toad to guide them in the right direction. After Ling Han passed through several consecutive forks in the road, he stopped. This was enough to shake off the pursuers behind him. Now, all he had to do was wait. Once they entered the other fork in the path, he would turn back and leave this place. With all the miners and supervisors together, how many people were there? Now, they had disappeared without a trace. It was unknown if they had been eaten or kidnapped. There was something strange about this. Under such circumstances, how could Ling Han dare to venture deep into the mine? However, a moment later, he heard the sound of footsteps. In this space, it was exceptionally clear. The three of them had caught up with him? Ling Han was astounded. He could clearly hear that there were a total of 3 sets of footsteps. Naturally, Li Changdan and the other two were the most likely source. Strange, they had already passed 7 forks. How could they chase after him so accurately? Could it be that one of these 3 people had a dog's nose? Ling Han immediately moved again. After walking for a while, a fork appeared in front of him. Ling Han chose the left path and entered. Then, after walking for a while, another fork appeared in front of him, and he chose the right path again. The mine wasn't completely pitch black. Instead, there were lamps hanging at regular intervals. These lamps were powered by electricity, and they could be used for about a month at a time. Thus, even though half a month had passed, these lamps hadn't been extinguished. After running like this for nearly 2 hours, Ling Han stopped to rest. He felt that his body was burning hot. If he continued to run, his blood vessels would probably explode. But 10 minutes later, he heard footsteps behind him again. Fuck. Ling Han decided not to run. Who was afraid of who? He took out the Talisman Weapon and waited quietly. As long as these 3 people appeared, he would use it. The main point was Li Changdan. As long as he severely injured Li Changdan, there would be nothing to worry about. He hid in a dark corner. At this point, he seemed to have exceeded the current limits that the mine had extended to, so there were no lights hanging on the cave walls. A gust of cold wind blew over, and Ling Han felt his entire body go cold, as if his blood was about to freeze. One had to know that he had opened his 6 meridians, and his power was close to 10,000 kilograms. His physique was extremely powerful, but now he actually felt that his blood was about to freeze. Something was not right. How could there be a cold wind blowing? If this place had just been dug out, then the end would be behind the darkness. But now there was a wind blowing over. What did this mean? The miners kept digging, and they might have dug through an underground cave. Who knew what was in that cave? Perhaps the disappearance of the miners and supervisors was related to this. Wait, there was also a strong stench. A strong sense of danger suddenly rose in Ling Han's heart, and he exerted strength in his legs. Shio, he darted out. Pa. A hole was punched into the wall he was leaning against, and a blood-red spear-like object was stabbed into the wall. Ling Han could not help but grind his teeth slightly. If he had reacted a little slower just now, the back of his head would have definitely been pierced through. Shio, the blood-red object retracted, and a colossal creature slowly crawled out from the darkness. Was this a lizard? Its length, including its tail, was about 6 meters. Its entire body was dark red, and its body was covered in scales. There was also a bright red rooster crown on its head, and the thing that had almost killed Ling Han just now was its tongue. Good Lord, not only was its tongue like a spear, but it could even pierce through hard rocks. This was too terrifying. Ling Han's heart trembled. Had all the villagers that had disappeared been eaten by this guy? At this moment, the footsteps behind him were getting closer and closer. Without any hesitation, Ling Han immediately turned around and fled. Li Changdan, Rue Yuanliang, and Yang Fei immediately appeared. When they saw Ling Han, they all revealed looks of surprise and joy. They finally found him. However, they would never have imagined that not only did Ling Han take the initiative to welcome them, he even had a smile on his face, as if the three of them were not here to kill him, but were his closest friends. This was too strange. Li Changdan's selfish side was immediately exposed. He was extremely wary of the talisman weapon in Ling Han's hand, and thought that Ling Han was deliberately approaching him with the intention of using the talisman weapon to kill them. Shio, he immediately paused and forcefully stopped himself. Chapter 3130, 3130 Hypocrite. Chapter 3130, 3130 Hypocrite. 3130 Hypocrite. When Li Changdan stopped, he was instantly separated from Rue Yuanliang and Yang Fei. Ling Han rushed out madly and clashed with the two of them in close-quarter combat. Ding, ding, ding. As weapons clashed, he did not linger to battle at all, and directly charged into the space between the two of them. Rue Yuanliang and Yang Fei were stunned. Fuck, why was Li Changdan like this again? However, Ling Han just happened to be surrounded by the three of them at this moment, so he was walking himself right into a siege. Good. Rue Yuanliang and Yang Fei both turned around and charged towards Ling Han again. Li Changdan was still hesitating whether he should make his move, but his expression suddenly changed because he saw a bright red lizard that was rapidly approaching them, as its 4 short legs moved at an indescribable speed. Pooh! The lizard stuck out its tongue, and like a spear, it directly sank into Yang Fei's back. Then, it penetrated through his chest, creating a fountain of blood. Yang Fei only struggled for a few moments before his limbs drooped, and with a tilt of his head, died. Rue Yuanliang was the closest, so he naturally witnessed this scene. He couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Yang Fei was only weaker than him by the cultivation level of a single meridian, but in front of this giant lizard, he did not even have the ability to fight back, and was directly insta-killed. Then, just how dangerous was it for him to be so close to this giant lizard? He was so terrified that he did not have any other thoughts. He rushed out with full speed, in hot pursuit of Ling Han. As long as he could run faster than Ling Han would become the first target of attack by this lizard. Then, there would be a chance for him to escape. Li Changdan, on the other hand, breathed a sigh of relief. The moment this lizard attacked, he could confirm that the cultivation level of this ferocious creature should also be 9 meridians. He was completely unafraid of that. Though it was very strange that a demonic beast had appeared in the territory of the ancient Dao sect, and one that had reached the height of 9 meridians at that, but now, he did not have the time to think too much about it. Immediately, he threw out a rock. He wanted to stop Ling Han, and let the lizard take the role of the main force in killing Ling Han. Meanwhile, he only needed to deal the finishing blow. Shio, a rock shot over at subsonic speed, its power incredibly terrifying. Ling Han didn't dare to take this strike head-on. With a flash, Ling Han dodged this strike. Rue Yuanliang was overjoyed. With Li Changdan stopping him, Ling Han would be forced to stop, giving him the chance to surpass Ling Han. To ensure that Ling Han would be behind him, he even brandished out a saber, slashing towards Ling Han's head. As long as Ling Han stopped to parry this strike, he would be able to completely surpass Ling Han. Ling Han humphed, and with a wave of his right hand, the long sword in his hand shot towards Rue Yuanliang. As a man who had gone through countless hardships to become an ultimate elite, his comprehension ability in battle was naturally incredibly amazing, and he was also incredibly decisive. If this was Rue Yuanliang, there was definitely no way for him to give up the weapon in his hand at this moment. This was the difference between a prodigy and a mediocre person. Rue Yuanliang was helpless. The distance was too close, and he couldn't possibly dodge it. He could only slant the saber in his hand to block this strike. Ding! A crisp sound rang out, and this strike was indeed blocked by him. However, he had also lost the chance to stop Ling Han's advance. Shwa! Right at this moment, that blood-colored lizard launched another attack. It stuck out its tongue like a long spear, aiming straight for Rue Yuanliang. Rue Yuanliang was shocked and hurriedly brandished his saber to fight fiercely with the blood-colored lizard. Pong, pong, pong. The tongue of the blood-colored lizard was incomparably hard. It could actually stand firm against sharp blades and not be damaged. Furthermore, this tongue was extremely agile. After a clash with the large saber, it could immediately become incomparably soft, and like a whip, continued to whip out at Rue Yuanliang. In just a few moves, Rue Yuanliang was already flustered. He had never encountered such an opponent before. Its attack method was strange, and it also had the advantage in power. He estimated that he would only be able to last 10 moves at most. He would definitely be like Yang Fei, having his heart pierced through by that tongue like a spear. "Li Changdan, save me. Hurry up and save me," he roared. He naturally didn't want to die. Li Changdan hesitated for a moment, but did not make a move. If he wanted to save Rue Yuanliang, he would have to fight with the blood-colored lizard, and Ling Han would be able to take the chance to escape. Humph, how could this be allowed? It was fine even if Rue Yuanliang died. A person that the Qi clan had given up on, aside from the fact that his cultivation level of 8 meridians was slightly useful, what other use did he have? And as long as Rue Yuanliang died, the target of the blood-colored lizard's attack would be Ling Han. Under the super strong attack of a 9 meridians, Ling Han would either die or use that talisman weapon. Then, if he attacked again, Ling Han would only die. Rue Yuanliang, just make some sacrifices. Shio. Ling Han threw out another rock. He was only stopping Ling Han's speed of advance. Fuck. Ling Han cursed in his heart, but faced with this attack, he had no choice but to dodge. Li Changdan, even if I become a ghost, I won't let you off. Rue Yuanliang roared in fury. He really couldn't take it anymore. Under the suppression of the power of 1 meridian, and with the attack of the blood-colored lizard being so tricky and strange, he couldn't withstand it any longer. Pooh! A burst of blood suddenly exploded from his chest, and a long tongue protruded from his chest. His eyes were fixed on Li Changdan. He could have saved them but did not, so he was naturally filled with resentment towards Li Changdan, dying with remaining grievances. Ling Han noticed that there were many spikes growing on the tongue of this lizard. Not only was this attack fatal, but it had also sucked dry all the blood in Rue Yuanliang's heart. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so little blood spurting out. Before he could have a second thought, the blood-colored lizard once again attacked, and this time, the target was naturally him. Ling Han blocked. He used the demonic monkey fists, and instantly, a primitive, overbearing aura circulated, possessing astonishing might. It was this fist technique again. Li Changdan saw this clearly. In the ancient formation, he had been defeated by this fist technique. Otherwise, how could he have lost to Ling Han when he had an advantage in power? He focused his attention on watching, and couldn't help but feel moved. Ling Han's power was clearly much inferior, yet he still managed to withstand a great many attacks with this fist technique. This was truly inconceivable. He was filled with greed. The might of this fist technique far surpassed the 4-directional fists, and the more brilliant the fist technique was, the faster the speed of cultivating the fist technique would naturally be. He was sure that Ling Han must have relied on this fist technique to be able to advance his cultivation level so quickly. Perhaps, Ling Han had a fist manual hidden on him. He began to focus his attention on the blood-colored lizard. Ling Han was destined to die, so it was inevitable that he would have to battle with this demonic beast. At the very least, he had to snatch Ling Han's corpse from it. Hence, he wanted to understand the method of attack of this blood-colored lizard. Ling Han frowned upon seeing this. Although he was trying his best to hold on, the power gap between them was far too large. Moreover, this demonic beast's tongue was like a precious tool, being soft at times and hard at others, which was extremely difficult to deal with. If this continued, he would only be able to last 50 moves at most. He could only use his trump card. Ling Han sighed. He had not thought that he would have to use the talisman weapon so quickly. But there was nothing that could be done. If he did not use it, could it be that he would leave it as a burial item for himself? With a wave of his hand, a yellow talisman paper was shot out. Schwa, golden light flickered, and an endless brilliance spread out. Chapter 31:31, 31:31 Talisman Weapon unleashes its might. Chapter 3131. 3131 Talisman Weapon unleashes its might. 3131 Talisman Weapon unleashes its might. As the talisman weapon was unleashed, brilliance of light circulated and turned into a golden human figure. It was as if it was forged from gold, with bright, dazzling light radiating around it. Ling Han could vaguely sense that he had some kind of connection with this human body and could send out a thought, telling it to attack whomever he wanted. This was because his blood was on the talisman paper, so when it transformed into a talisman weapon, it also had a divine connection with him. Pong! The golden talisman weapon moved to parry the blood-colored lizard. This had attained the level of 10 meridians, and not only was its power stronger, it could also unleash full might. There was no need for it to even strike directly, and the blood-colored lizard was instantly sent flying. This was quite astonishing indeed. The blood-colored lizard was obviously just weaker in cultivation level by 1 meridian, but now it appeared to be completely unable to fight back. Xiao, the blood-colored lizard spat out its long tongue, which turned into a spear, launching another attack. Its defenses were quite amazing, as it actually didn't get injured much after taking this blow. The golden talisman weapon clenched its fist. Pong! Another punch from the distance was shot out, and the course of that long tongue was instantly blocked. Then, it bounced backwards, turning into a soft coil. This was also thanks to the fact that this tongue could be hard and soft at will. Otherwise, it was very likely that it would break under the impact of this punch. Pong, pong, pong. The golden talisman weapon took the initiative to attack, launching a barrage of attacks at the blood-colored lizard. Changdan revealed a cold smile. As expected, he was right not to rush forward. Otherwise, when going up against a 10 Meridians elite, he would have been killed in a few moves. He certainly didn't have such a sturdy defense that he could take the attacks of a 10 Meridians elite head-on. Why was it said that the 10 Meridians could be considered as the king tier? That was because they had an absolute one-sided advantage over those with cultivation level of 9 Meridians and below. However, he naturally wouldn't just stand by and watch. Xiao! He hurled out a rock, aiming straight for Ling Han. Pong! The golden talisman weapon threw a punch from afar, and this rock was instantly blown into smithereens. At the same time, its left fist smashed towards the blood-colored lizard. In a battle of 2 against 1, it still had the absolute upper hand. Ling Han sighed. This Changdan was indeed extremely cautious, drawing out the distance and not approaching the battle zone. If Ling Han was to command the golden talisman weapon to pursue Changdan, then before the golden talisman weapon could catch up to Changdan, Ling Han would have been killed by the blood-colored lizard first. Thus, he had no choice but to only deal with this blood-colored lizard first. This ferocious creature was really powerful. Its skin was thick and sturdy, and it was fine even after sustaining the attacks of 10 Meridians level continuously, although a considerable number of its scales had been sliced off. However, it had to be admitted that if it was a human being that had sustained so many attacks, his internal organs would probably have long since been smashed into mush. It was no wonder that the demonic beasts now ruled this world. Humans could only be segregated to some small areas to toil in while holding on to their last breaths. Indeed, in a battle of equal cultivation levels, the demonic beasts had great advantage. It was just that right now the blood-colored lizard could only take the beating passively. A 10 Meridians king tier could unleash its might externally, so there was no chance to even draw near to it. No matter how strong its physique was, it also couldn't stand such continuous beating. It was really quite vicious. It did not retreat even in this manner, as if it was going to endure until the energy of the talisman weapon was exhausted, and then swallow Ling Han alive. Fuck, was there a need to go so far? Ling Han was rendered speechless. From his point of view, the most ideal situation was for the golden talisman weapon to force the blood-colored lizard away, and then severely injure Changdan. Then, he would be able to take back control of the situation. Ha ha ha. Changdan laughed out loud. He was still continuously throwing rocks, forcing the talisman weapon to have to split out a portion of its power to disperse his attacks, reducing the pressure on the blood-colored lizard. As long as the blood-colored lizard dragged on until the talisman weapon's power was exhausted, he would be able to successfully clean up this mess. He was sure that by that time, this giant lizard would also be riddled with wounds and unable to withstand a single blow. However, how could King Tears be so easily dealt with? As expected, under the fierce attacks of the talisman weapon, this blood-colored lizard was soon bathed in blood. Its blood was really too smelly, causing Ling Han to involuntarily cover his nose, as if smelling too much would cause him to be poisoned. The giant lizard cowered back from the battle. The greed of a predator was finally no match for a predator's survival instinct, and it began to retreat. You still want to run now? Ling Han had also gotten furious and controlled the golden talisman weapon to start chasing it down. If the blood-colored lizard had fled earlier, there might have been a shred of a chance, as the terrain of this mine was complex, and so long as Ling Han managed to be thrown off its tail, the threat posed by the golden talisman weapon would naturally disappear on its own. But now, its injuries were too heavy. As it fled, it was still dripping blood continuously. In such a state, how could it possibly escape from the pursuit of the golden talisman weapon? It had already caught up to it in just a few steps. Pung, pung, pung. A furious barrage of fists blasted at it violently, causing its scales to be smashed to smithereens and scatter all over. Wang, the golden talisman weapon, suddenly made a powerful move, which originally had flickering rays of light, but now became a dazzling brilliance. Then it threw a punch and shot out a golden ball of light, like a flame. This strike was very scary. One could see that the gravel on the ground flew up, hanging in the air, as if in a state of weightlessness. With this golden ball of light, these gravels were also shot out in tandem. Shio, shio, shio. It was as if limitless flying rocks were sent out. The golden light hit, and that blood-colored lizard couldn't help but let out a sharp cry. Then, its limbs weakened, and it could no longer move. Furthermore, it naturally would not be able to dodge the following barrage of rocks, and was instantly turned into a sieve. The main thing was that most of the scales on its body had already been hit, which led to a great decrease in its defenses. In addition to this being another powerful move, this ferocious creature was directly blasted into smithereens. It was finally dealt with. Ling Han turned around, and correspondingly, the golden talisman weapon also turned around, facing Li Changdan directly. However, Li Changdan remained calm and unruffled. Junior brother, how long can your talisman weapon last? As expected, this guy knew about the talisman weapon. No wonder he had been so cowardly all this while. However, if this kind of secret weapon remained unused, then its might would be even greater. Now that he had drawn it, his trump card had already been revealed, allowing Li Changdan the opportunity to find the means to deal with it. Ling Han humphed. What do you think? With a thought, the golden talisman weapon immediately charged towards Li Changdan. Ling Han followed suit. He could feel that he had to be within a certain range with the golden talisman weapon. Otherwise, the mental connection would be severed, and he would no longer be able to command this talisman weapon. Li Changdan laughed loudly, but his figure retreated rapidly. His speed was not as fast as the golden talisman weapon, but that was fine, as long as he was not slower than Ling Han. The golden talisman weapon could not escape from Ling Han's range of command, so he was at ease. After only a short while, Ling Han discovered that the light on the talisman weapon was slightly dimming. Power was about to be exhausted. Without the slightest hesitation, he suddenly turned around and fled. After the battle with the blood-colored lizard, Ling Han knew that he could not possibly be a match for 9 Meridians now, especially for the likes of Li Changdan, with strength that surpassed even the peak stage of an average 9 Meridians. As expected, the talisman weapon only launched another punch, and its figure became extremely dim. In the end, it turned into a streak of light and disappeared. Junior brother Ling, you ought to return what you owe me, right? Li Changdan turned around and chased after Ling Han. Catch me first. Ling Han moved quickly. Li Changdan smiled and said, Don't speak so ambiguously. It will cause others to misunderstand. At this moment, he had recovered his full confidence. Chapter 31-32, 3132 Another World. Chapter 3132. 3132 Another World. 3132 Another World. Ling Han ran as fast as he could. The terrain of this mine was complicated, and it wouldn't take long for crossroads to appear. This could greatly reduce the threat of Changdan throwing rocks, but he was still impossible to be disregarded. It couldn't be helped. In the mine, there were still a few scattered lights on, providing illumination, but this did not have much effect on Changdan's aim. Ling Han gritted his teeth and ran back to where he had come from. It wasn't long before darkness appeared before them. It was profound and unfathomable. Ling Han didn't hesitate at all, immediately throwing himself into the darkness. Changdan frowned. In such a dark environment, he could only throw rocks randomly. Moreover, what if he was ambushed? He couldn't detect anything at all. However, he also made up his mind in an instant, and his speed did not slow down in the slightest. It didn't matter. Ling Han was in front of him, and if there really were any vicious creatures sneaking up on them, they would attack Ling Han first, just like he was a trailblazer. "Junior brother Ling, why are you running so fast? Let's have a good chat," he said calmly, feeling that everything was under his control. Ling Han sneered and said, "Hypocrite, have you forgotten that you were thrashed to tears by me? And yet, you still have the audacity to act arrogant in front of me." Changdan's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. Fighting with Ling Han in the ancient formation was his most humiliating experience. He had been kicked in the nuts twice, and when he returned and underwent an examination, the doctor said that even one of them had cracked. This was also another reason why the He clan had called off the wedding. There was no guarantee that they could even have a descendant. What was the use of having such a son-in-law? All of this was because of Ling Han. "You be it starred, when you fall into my hands, I won't kill you so easily. Instead, I'll skin you first," Changdan said balefully. "But don't worry, you won't die. I'll give you a treasured medicine to keep you hanging on to life so that you can see and feel all of this with your own eyes. Then, I'll shatter every single bone in your body, and finally, I'll slice you off bit by bit, right until you breathe your last." Ling Han smirked coldly. Hidden underneath the hypocrisy of this modest gentleman was an almost depraved soul. He didn't say anything further and just kept running. This passage was very long, and there was no place to turn. Otherwise, in such a pitch-black environment, even if there was a wall in front of him, Ling Han would not have been able to stop himself in time. After running for more than 2 hours, Ling Han felt all the blood in his body boil. He felt extremely terrible, and it was as if his legs were about to explode. After running at an extremely high speed for so long, his body had already reached its limit. Right at this moment, a small bright spot appeared ahead of him. There was an exit. Ling Han forced himself to hold on and continued to run madly. This small bright spot was getting bigger and bigger. It was indeed an exit. For a while, Ling Han had no time to think about the fact that he was running in an underground tunnel, yet a strange exit had appeared. A change of scenery was definitely a good thing. It would be best if there was a great river or something outside the exit, allowing him to escape the pursuit of Changdan. After a few more minutes, the exit was already within sight. Don't even think about it. Changdan was already closing in. Previously, because the environment was too dark, he had been afraid that there would be an ambush here, so he had not been running at full speed. But now that the exit was right in front of him, he was also afraid that there would be changes to the current situation. Thus, he burst out with speed. Shio, he had already closed in on Ling Han. Stretching out his right hand, he formed it into a claw and reached out to grab at Ling Han's back. Ling Han did not parry, but rather channeled the brother monkey cultivation technique. Instantly, it was as if he was like a dried-up spring that had obtained a new life. Suddenly, endless power surged, instantly causing his speed to soar. He suddenly sped up, breaking away from Changdan's range of attack, and charged out in an instant. "Where are you running to?" Changdan chased after him. He had lost all patience. Pooh! Ling Han had just dashed out, when he suddenly felt a frightening killing intent assault him. At this moment, a purple-colored brilliance surged out from his chest, diminishing that killing intent slightly. Even so, he still spluttered out a mouthful of blood. Pa! He could no longer run, and directly collapsed onto the ground. Ling-ah! Li Changdan chased out, and when he saw Ling Han lying flat on the ground, he was naturally overjoyed. He was just about to chase after him and take him down, when an incredibly fierce killing intent assaulted him, causing him to be completely unguarded. His legs were instantly severed at the knee. Pong! He too collapsed onto the ground, blood gushing out like a fountain. The pain caused him to let out a non-stop blood-curdling scream. His face was filled with fear and disbelief. A prodigy like him had an incredibly bright future ahead of him, but now he had become a cripple. How could he accept this? How could he not be terrified? As shrewd as he was, now he was having a mental breakdown. Ling Han picked himself up with much difficulty. He lowered his head to look, and the pendant hanging on his chest was presently exuding a faint purple light, spreading out into an area. Obviously, he had only fallen down because he had the protection of this pendant. Looking at Li Changdan's miserable state, one would know the result of barging in here rashly. Could this be attributed to his own luck? Ling Han scratched his head. He didn't run anywhere else, and there were also countless crossroads, but he came here nonetheless. It was as if there was a hand controlling the fate of everything in this world. Only at this moment was he in the mood to survey the place. To his surprise, this was actually a group of buildings. There were many ancient-looking buildings and towers, and the architectural style was very similar to the ancient Dao sect, with every building exuding a soft luster. It wasn't very bright, but with so many buildings, and coupled with the fact that the environment was so dark, it became very eye-catching. Aside from these buildings, there were also a great many trees here. Their types were all different, but only one bore fruit. It was very short, only about 5 feet tall, and there were 3 bright red fruits on it. In the case of other trees, to say nothing of bearing fruit, even their leaves would not grow, as if they had withered for several hundred years. So fragrant. Ling Han sniffed with his nose. The fruit was exuding a fragrance, and just a single sniff was enough to stir the power in his body. That was a treasured tree, Ling Han thought to himself, and revealed a joyful expression. Just a single sniff was enough to produce such an effect. If he consumed it, his cultivation level would definitely improve greatly. This was much more powerful than that precious tree in Monkey Valley. However, as Ling Han's gaze swept across the vicinity, it might appear to be peaceful here, but he knew that danger lurked in every step. A formation. Previously, he had barged in rashly and triggered the attack of the formations. Thankfully, the pendant on his neck took effect, which caused him to only spit out a little blood. Otherwise, his arms and legs would definitely have been broken. He glanced at Li Changdan. That guy was still wailing in grief. Fate really played tricks on him. This pendant had originally belonged to Li Changdan, but he had deliberately taken the initiative to trifle with Ling Han. Otherwise, how could he have suffered such a calamity? This is called fate. Ling Han sighed, but did not know how lethal this sentence was to Li Changdan. Since the pendant could suppress the effects of the formations to the limited extent, can it let him approach the fruit trees, pick the fruit, and then enter those buildings to see if there were any ancient books left behind inside them? This must have been left by an ancient civilization. Ling Han picked himself up and started deducing. Chapter 31-33, 31-33 7 Meridians. Chapter 31-33, 3133 7 Meridians. 31-33 7 Meridians. Without the pendant, Ling Han would never dare to charge into this formation. This was practically a killing formation, capable of crippling anyone with a single move. After a few attempts, any trespasser would be done for. But right now, Ling Han still had some confidence. He took one step forward, and suddenly, a wave of killing intent surged over, and Ling Han was sent flying. Pain, pain, pain. Ling Han clutched his chest. Though the pendant had taken effect and extinguished this killing intent in time, it still sent him flying, striking his chest painfully and causing him to spit out another mouthful of blood. Fuck. If this continued, even if he could break through this formation, just coughing out blood would be enough to kill him, right? However, as he looked at the fruit tree in front of him, Ling Han's heart burned with desire. He definitely had to obtain these 3 fruits. He walked again and again and again. Then, he was sent flying again and again. He spat out blood again and again. And this was because he still had the protection of the pendant. Otherwise, who knew how many times he would have already died. However, Ling Han's eyes lit up as he managed to capture some changes in this great formation. There was a chance. He was astonished as he discovered that despite having sustained so many strikes, he had actually not suffered very serious injuries. Logically, he should have accumulated too many injuries after so many times of attack, and at this moment could only lie on the ground and pant for air. Brother Monkey had said that his body was filled with life and vitality. Could it be that it was because of this that his recovery ability was so amazing? This should be an ability that he had brought out from the Divine Stone, right? After all, he had once been a heavenly venerate, and had also possessed the unique traits of the entire Genesis world. How could he possibly be ordinary? Again, he made continuous attempts, and after half a day, he finally took a step forward. Despite it only being 1 step, it actually meant that he had finally grasped the pattern of the formations. Subsequently, he took a dozen over steps consecutively, but was once again sent flying. This formation was far more complicated than the ancient formation of the Dao Child Audition. It was difficult to completely understand it. More importantly, that formation previously did not have much destructive power. It mainly had a psychedelic effect, but this was a different story. It was aiming to kill. Every attempt caused Ling Han to suffer greatly, so his progress naturally slowed down. He repeated the motions, moving step by step, and kept approaching the fruit tree. He had to hurry up. At present, he was only a mortal and needed to eat and drink. If he could not succeed even after a few days, then wouldn't he starve to death or die of thirst? Fortunately, he has an amazing understanding on formations and was assisted by the pendant, so his progress was fast. After almost a day had passed, he was only 10 steps away from that fruit tree. Success was imminent. At such a close distance, Ling Han breathed in that fragrance, and it was as if the feeling of hunger had been eliminated. He mustered his spirit and continued forward. On the other side, Li Changdan finally suppressed the pain of his crippled legs for the time being. After all, no matter how much he wailed, it would not be able to solve the problem. He glared hatefully at Ling Han, and when he saw that Ling Han was already close to approaching that fruit tree, he couldn't help but reveal an expression of endless jealousy. Li Changdan knew that the reason Ling Han could avoid the calamity of having his legs severed and could even approach that precious tree step by step was all because of that pendant that had once belonged to him. That was his. Now that his legs were crippled, he would probably be forever removed from the ranks of prodigies contending for the ultimate position, and all of this was because of Ling Han. His fists were tightly clenched into fists, and an endless hatred rose up in his heart. Ling Han must die, definitely. He first treated his own injuries to prevent himself from dying due to the loss of too much blood. Then, he slowly retreated to the exit. Ling Han would definitely come out, and although his legs were crippled, he still had the suppressive advantage of 3 Meridians in terms of cultivation level. If Ling Han didn't come out, he could only starve to death. If he came out, he would be beaten to death. Li Changdan thought for a moment, then took his 2 severed legs with him as well. If he was hungry to the point that he could barely hold on, then he would eat his own severed legs. He did not believe that Ling Han would have such strong determination to sever his own legs as well. With such determination for revenge, he could also be considered a freak. 9 steps, 8 steps, 7 steps, Ling Han was getting closer and closer to the fruit tree. Finally, he stretched out his hand and grabbed onto a fruit. He plucked it, and the strong aroma of the fruit surged, causing his spirit to be shaken. Ling Han turned around, only to see Changdan staring at him with venomous eyes at the entrance at a distance. Sigh, even with 2 severed legs, he was still guarding him here, instead of quickly going out to find a doctor. He raised his fruit, signaling with the fruit, as if they were clinking cups from afar. Changdan simply clenched his fists and didn't reply. Ling Han wasn't bothered about him either. He casually rubbed the fruit, then began to eat ravenously. After taking the first bite, he almost threw this fruit away. Fuck, what in the world is this? It's so bitter. Shouldn't precious fruit be sweet, juicy, and incredibly delicious? However, he immediately felt that there was an incomparably powerful energy hidden within the flesh of the fruit. This was indeed a treasured fruit. He swallowed it down. Ling Han was not interested in chewing again. He gorged and completely ate up the first fruit. There was a seed, but it was very small. He thought for a while and kept it in his pocket. Boom! A powerful wave of energy immediately surged through his body. The surge of the energy was like it was going to explode from within him. This energy was too massive. Ling Han quickly sat down in a cross-legged position and channeled the brother monkey cultivation technique. The power in his body was suddenly being guided and circulated according to Ling Han's wishes, flowing through his arteries and veins. The 6th meridian had just been opened and was still far from expanding to the extreme, but now, with every surge of power, his meridians would expand at an astonishing rate. In less than half an hour, he had already reached the peak stage of 6 meridians. However, the energy of the fruit had not completely dissipated and was still very violent. Ling Han went on to sense the 7th meridian. There was nowhere for the violent energy in his body to seep out, and flowed everywhere violently, causing Ling Han to be very wounded. He felt so terrible that it was as if his entire being was about to explode. This was not an illusion, but something that really could happen. The more this was the case, the calmer Ling Han became. He calmly sensed the 7th meridian, and after a while, a smile appeared on his face. Boom! That violent power instantly gained direction and crashed towards the 7th meridian. While Ling Han suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. This power was too violent, causing him to suffer an extremely strong backlash. However, as he spat out this mouthful of blood, the internal meridians within his body also suddenly opened up. The energy originating from the precious fruit directly opened up the 7th meridian in the most crude manner. Then, it rushed through them again and again, causing his meridians to become even wider and be able to accommodate even more power. After another 10 minutes or so, the precious fruit's power was finally used up completely. Ling Han breathed out a sigh of relief. There was still lingering fear in his heart. Just now, it was really possible that he would have died. But subsequently, he plucked another fruit without the slightest hesitation and placed it into his mouth. He practically swallowed it whole. Chapter 3134, 3134 Cultivation Level Soaring. Chapter 3134, 3134 Cultivation Level Soaring. 3134 Cultivation Level Soaring. Compared to the increase in strength, what was a little pain worth? On Ling Han's whole journey up to this point, had he had any lack of this kind of tempering? The second fruit was consumed and being digested in his stomach. Boom! The terrifying energy once again turned into massive waves that wreaked havoc in his body. Ling Han firmed his resolve and used Brother Monkey Cultivation technique as a guide. The 7 meridians middle stage, late stage, peak stage, and finally he reached the crucial moment again. Ling Han sensed his 8th meridian, and with a slight tremor, he had already crossed over into this new threshold. Wah! He still spat out a mouthful of blood. Under the frenzied surge of energy wreaking havoc within, his 8th meridian was penetrated through in an incredibly rough manner, which naturally caused his internal organs to go on a rampage. However, the precious fruit's power had also been exhausted. The first fruit pushed Ling Han's cultivation level to a whole new level altogether, but for the second fruit, the cultivation level attained was slightly inferior. It couldn't be helped. The energy needed to break through into 8 meridians would definitely far supersede the energy needed for 7 meridians. Ling Han looked at the last fruit. Would this help him charge forward to 9 meridians? Without hesitation, he plucked the last fruit and consumed it. Boom! A tsunami wave of energy surged in his body for the 3rd time. 8 meridians middle stage, late stage, peak stage. At this moment, the energy storm had already calmed down and was no longer as surging as before. Then, it immediately became calm. He was just that little bit away. Ling Han felt that it was a pity. As long as this fruit still had that little bit of power, he would be able to move with the flow, sense his 9th meridian, and advance into the 9 meridians at one go. He faltered for a moment. This was because he could sense slivers of power drifting around him. Previously, it had been close to 0, yet now, it was surging. Realization dawned upon Ling Han. It was time for the sun to rise. Good. He continued to channel the brother monkey cultivation technique and stimulated the mystical power of heaven and earth in the surroundings to open up the 9th meridian in his body. After more than 10 minutes, Ling Han's body trembled. His 9th meridian had already opened, and energy was surging in like a small stream, circulating through this meridian. 9 meridians. Success. At present, his advancement was extremely slow. After all, he was only extracting the power of heaven and earth, unlike the precious fruit, with the treasure tree having taken root. Who knew how much mystical power of heaven and earth had been absorbed and condensed within the fruit? The sudden explosion of such energy was naturally incredibly swift and fierce. However, true cultivation was accumulated over time. How could it be that there would be treasured fruits to eat every day? Half an hour later, Ling Han stopped. He could no longer sense the mystical power of heaven and earth, so he naturally could no longer cultivate. He stood up and swept his gaze over the surrounding houses. He wanted to explore. It was possible that there were alchemical pills of ancient times left behind inside. Then, if he ingested them one by one, would they be able to directly send him to attain 12 meridians? It didn't matter even if he improved too quickly. He could calm down and carefully temper himself when he was in the 12 meridians, and when he has become incomparably stable, he could then attempt to break through to the next major tier. Although he still didn't know what the next major tier was, he was sure that definitely there would be. He took a few steps and was only just over a meter away from the nearest building. However, an incredibly dangerous feeling suddenly rose up in his heart. He felt that if he took another step forwards, he would die. He was judging based on the formations he had previously studied, and his expression couldn't help but change drastically. The power of this formation would become greater the closer one got to the area of the houses. Thus, if he had only vomited blood from being slashed previously, it was possible that he would be directly severed in the next moment. With his current strength and attainments in formations, it was too difficult. Ling Han nodded. He could only give up now. When he has become much stronger, or when his mastery of formations had improved, he would come here to try again. He turned around and looked at the exit. Changdan was still sitting there, holding a sword in his hand, his eyes extremely fierce. His 2 lower legs had been severed. The pain was naturally heart-wrenching, and what supported Changdan's waiting was naturally his hatred for Ling Han. He wanted revenge, revenge, revenge. Seeing that Ling Han was finally walking towards him, Changdan sneered. You're finally unable to endure your thirst and want to go out, right? What was the use of 3 fruits? Would they be able to quench one's thirst or relieve one's hunger? Come, accept your death. Ling Han walked over. He had already seen through the formations in this area, so he walked easily and calmly, as if he was walking on flat ground. Soon, he arrived at a spot that was only 6 meters away from Changdan. However, he couldn't release his power. Even at such a close distance, Changdan didn't dare to act recklessly. The formations were in front of him, and there was terrifying killing intent. Staying here all this while, I trust it's not because you want to escort me back to the sect, right? Ling Han asked with a smile. Changdan forcefully suppressed his anger and replied calmly, No. You want to kill me so badly? Yes. Are you capable of killing me? Naturally. Ling Han nodded and strode towards Li Changdan. Then let's give it a try. Shua, a flash of sword light swept past. Li Changdan brandished his sword, stabbing towards Ling Han's chest. He actually wanted to pierce Ling Han's throat, but because his legs were broken, his height was not high enough. Thus, this strike could only pierce towards Ling Han's chest. Ling Han shot out with a punch, parrying the incoming attack of the long sword. Li Changdan couldn't help but sneer. Did this brat think that just because he had crippled both his legs, all his strength was rendered useless? Fine, I will break this guy's arms first. However, just as the blade of the sword was about to collide with Ling Han's fist, Ling Han's arm twisted in an inconceivable manner, turning into a fist that struck the body of his sword. Pong! The fist hit, and instantly, a massive force reverberated. The long sword slanted to one side. Naturally, without an accurate aim, it couldn't pierce anything. Li Changdan felt a pain in the web between his thumb and forefinger and almost let go of his sword. He couldn't help but feel stunned. Just how great was this power? He looked at Ling Han in shock and felt that his mind was in complete chaos. Ling Han smiled faintly. Without enough abilities, how would I dare to ask senior brother Li for guidance? It's those 3 treasured fruits. Li Changdan finally understood. Ling Han had eaten 3 fruits just then. It must be because these fruits were too precious that this guy's strength had soared. In fact, he wasn't inferior to him at all. You guessed correctly. Ling Han touched his fists together. Li Changdan, I've never trifled with you, yet you first sent Zheng Tongfeng to lure me to the casino, and then made Rui Yuanliang and the others frame me just because I might threaten your status as the Dao Child. Isn't that enough? Li Changdan said through gritted teeth, his expression twisted. Ling Han shook his head and said, Your framework is pitifully small. The world is so big, and as long as one has abilities, what place can't he rise? Then why are you snatching my position as Dao Child? Li Changdan roared harshly. Snatch your position? Ling Han laughed in spite of himself. Had the position of Dao Child already been reserved for Li Changdan? Forget it. This kind of person was extremely self-centered. What was there to say? He would kill him. Ling Han unleashed his demonic monkey fists, unleashing a boundless might. Li Changdan was at a disadvantageous position, so he slapped the ground with one hand to shake himself up. Then, he adjusted his position. However, this was ultimately not nimble enough. Very soon, Ling Han approached him, and in a few moves, he had sent the long sword in his hand flying. Pooh! Ling Han followed up with another punch, which landed on Li Changdan's chest, instantly creating an obvious groove. Chapter 3135, 3135 Lair. Chapter 3135, 3135 Lair. 3135 Lair. Li Changdan's eyes were glazed. He lowered his head to look at his chest, then looked back up at Ling Han. He could no longer feel the pain. He wanted to speak, but could not open his mouth at all. His body slowly slid down. Pong! He fell onto the ground, his eyes still wide open, unwilling to close. Ling Han searched Li Changdan's body and soon found the box containing the jade-colored toad. However, he didn't know what it was meant for. All he knew was that for Li Changdan to store it like this, it should be something good. He hid himself, then left this place. The danger from Li Changdan and the others had been resolved, but he still hadn't investigated clearly the secret of the disappearance of all the miners. Indeed, he had discovered a 9 Meridians giant iguana. It was very likely that it had eaten all the miners, but the problem was, how could a 9 Meridians monster appear out of nowhere in the territory of the ancient Dao sect? Every year, the disciples of the sect would conduct a large-scale search in the mountains. As long as it was not a place that was suppressed by the formations, they would do a search. Thus, it was practically impossible for any demonic beast to take root here and grow stronger. Well, that may not necessarily be the case. For example, Brother Monkey has never been discovered before. Ling Han pondered. Should he return like this and report the situation, or should he just wait and see? and get to the bottom of it. I'm already in the early stage of the 9 Meridians, and my strength probably exceeds 25,000 kilograms. It's comparable to the 10 Meridians early stage, but the only difference is that my power can't be unleashed. Ling Han pondered and said, so, even if I encounter another giant lizard now, I'll be the one to trample on it. All right, let's look around again. Ling Han explored the mine. After a long time, he actually found another pitch-black cave. He pulled off a lamp from the cave wall. As he shone it, he discovered that the traces of the cave entrance were very new because it was only recently excavated. However, when he walked in, he discovered that the cave wall was already covered with moss. What did this signify? This cave had already existed for a long time. It was just that it had been dug out recently. So smelly. A gust of wind suddenly blew out of the cave, bringing with it a strong stench, causing Ling Han to cover his nose. Was this the lair of that blood-colored lizard? Ling Han walked forwards very slowly, his footsteps almost inaudible. At the same time, he blew out the lantern in his hand. After taking a few steps, the stench became more and more intense. Ling Han relit the lantern again, then tossed it forward. The light swept out in a curve, illuminating the scenery along the way. Disgust instantly spread across Ling Han's face. He looked at the large and small blood-colored lizards that were eating, and their food was corpses. Though he had only glimpsed them briefly, Ling Han was sure that these people were the missing miners. Their clothes and heights matched the description. Pong! The lamp landed on the ground and rolled a few times. It actually did not break and was still exuding light. Those feeding lizards immediately crawled towards that lamp, and as their 4 short legs flew, their speed was astonishingly fast. However, these reptiles did not seem to have developed intelligence and pounced and bit at that lamp. Very soon, the lamp was destroyed, and darkness returned once more to the scene. Ling Han saw very clearly that these lizards were not as big as the first one. Going by that logic, their abilities should also be inferior to the first one. He did not charge out rashly, because there were too many lizards, and the environment here was too dark. He was not like these reptiles that had already adapted to the dark environment and was still able to retain their vision. Ling Han exited the room and retrieved a few lamps. He then returned and placed them on the ground, one after another. He then picked up the crushed rocks on the ground and tossed them forward. Pa, pa, pa. The rocks carried at least 15,000 kilograms of power, and they were all thrown out at subsonic speeds. This destructive power was incredibly terrifying. When they landed on the cave walls, sparks flew, and if they landed on the lizards, blood would directly spurt out. This instantly enraged the group of lizards, and in an instant, dozens of lizards of all sizes surged over. Ling Han continued to throw rocks. His present strength was too terrifying. When these lizards rushed into the zone of light, his aim had also improved greatly. While not all his throws landed, he still had around 50% accuracy. Pong, pong, pong. One after another, the lizards were sent flying, and the scales on their bodies flew in all directions. They appeared to be in a very gruesome state. However, Ling Han was only one person, after all, so he naturally couldn't stop all the lizards. Soon, 5 of the lizards managed to approach him. Ling Han didn't throw any more rocks. Instead, he channeled the 4 directional fists. Go! He shouted lightly, and a deep power exploded. This was power that was as high as 25,000 kilograms, which was far more terrifying than throwing rocks. Pong! With a punch, a lizard was directly blasted apart, showing just how terrifying his current strength was. Ling Han raised his foot again and shot out a flying kick. Though he had not practiced any kind of kicking technique, his power was clear for all to see. One kick was still as heavy as 20,000 kilograms, and another lizard was kicked to death. Come, come, come. Ling Han laughed loudly. He had advanced 3 cultivation levels in a row, and in terms of power alone, he was not the slightest bit inferior to 10 Meridian stronghouses. These lizards were only 7 to 8 Meridians, so how could they possibly be a match for him? Moreover, Ling Han was still unable to release his power at that. Otherwise, these lizards would not even be qualified to approach him. Even with a certain distance between them, he could crush them into dust by his violent power. What surprised Ling Han was that these lizards were incredibly fierce. They clearly saw their companions being continuously killed, yet they still pounced one after another. However, under the suppression of absolute strength, this naturally was only courting death. Very soon, these lizards were all killed by Ling Han. The clothes he was wearing had also been torn in a few places, leaving behind a few injuries. It wasn't deep, but the wound was black in color. As expected, the lizards were poisonous. Ling Han hurriedly sat down and channeled the brother monkey cultivation technique. After channeling it a few times, black liquid oozed out of his wounds, as well as an indescribable stench. A feeling of weariness rose up inside him. Expelling poison using the cultivation technique had consumed a lot of his energy. Thankfully, the wound had already turned red and would not leave behind any future trouble. After Ling Han rested for a while, he stood up. Carrying a lamp, he entered into the depths of the cave to explore. Aside from the corpses of humans, there were also neat rows of lizard eggs here. They were pink in color, and merely looking at the eggs, they looked quite cute. However, just thinking about how they would gnaw on the corpses, Ling Han was quickly overwhelmed by disgust. A look of surprise appeared on his face, because among these corpses, he discovered one that was completely out of place in terms of clothing. This corpse was dressed in robes and held a broken sword in its hand. There was a fist-sized wound on its chest, which should have directly burst its heart, but the strange thing was that this wound was actually still oozing with fresh blood. Those lizard eggs were laid in the blood on the ground. Could it be that these lizards were originally very ordinary, but because of this blood, they evolved rapidly? Chapter 3136, 3136 The Elder's Shock. Chapter 3136, 3136 The Elder's Shock. 3136 The Elder's Shock. Ling Han tried to get closer for a closer look, but he discovered that when he was about 3 meters away from the ancient corpse, a terrifying killing intent immediately assaulted him. It could be clearly seen that the initially calm air had actually turned into multiple sharp blades, and the blades were all aimed at him. If Ling Han advanced one step further, he would be struck by the sharp blades and be pierced into mush. A corpse that had been dead for who knew how long actually had such might. It could be imagined that when this ancient corpse was alive, it must have been a super elite. Perhaps it had advanced above Meridian opening tier and stood on an even higher peak on the mountain of martial arts. But now, he had turned into a corpse, lying in this dark world. Who knew how many years he had been dead for? How could a civilization disappear all of a sudden? Ling Han thought back to the lower realm of his past. That was because there was the control of the 5 sects of the immortal realm, turning the lower realm into a massive cauldron, using all living creatures as ingredients to concoct a great alchemical pill. Was it the same here? If that was the case, then it would still be very different. There were no spies or eyes and ears of the 5 sects here. He took a few steps back and arrived beside those lizard eggs. Now that he was here, the killing intent was no longer apparent. Perhaps an ordinary lizard had come here by accident and then eaten the blood here, beginning its rapid path of evolution. It gave birth here, wanting its descendants to also absorb this kind of precious blood, so that they could develop their own pack into a powerful force in a short period of time. Perhaps it was precisely because there was too little time that these ferocious creatures had not developed intelligence. When that female lizard reached a certain cultivation level, she had gone to find food for the small lizards, which resulted in the disappearance of the whole group of miners. As for that ancient site, it should be a coincidence. Coincidentally, the miners dug through there, and before they could report it, they had already suffered a calamity. No matter what, this explanation still made sense. Ling Han looked at the blood on the ground, slightly apprehensive. This was human blood, and it was unknown how many years he had been dead for. Even if it was very nutritious, he still felt a psychological barrier stopping him from actually wanting to consume it. After hesitating for a while, he decided to let it go. He began to return, and as his power increased explosively again, his speed naturally also increased to a new height. He only spent a day and a half, and he had already returned to the ancient Dao sect. After seeing Sun Jianfeng, he told him the whole story from beginning to end. He didn't feel the slightest bit of guilt about this matter, so he naturally didn't need to hide it. Moreover, he had already consumed the treasured fruits, so he wasn't afraid of others coveting it. What? There's actually such a thing. Sun Jianfeng was furious. Li Changdan, Rue Yuanliang, and Yang Fei were too arrogant. They actually dared to commit a crime in the territory of the sect. Fortunately, the Dao Child that he had chosen was truly freakish. Not only had these three people failed to kill Ling Han, but they had even lost their lives. An ancient historical site appeared in the mine? Sun Jianfeng was stunned again. This must be the real site of the ancient Dao sect. However, the transformation of heaven and earth isn't complete yet, so only this part of it has appeared now. He was extremely excited and immediately convened an elder-level meeting to inform them of this matter. Ling Han also attended. He was the Dao Child, the future sect master, so he was naturally qualified to attend. Moreover, he was also the one who had discovered it, so it was naturally up to him to explain. Hearing his words, Elder Zhu and Sun Jianfeng's expressions were the same. They were both extremely excited. The discovery of a new ancient site, what did that mean? Books left behind by an ancient great elite. They were all trapped at the 10 meridians, the 11 meridians, the 12 meridians, and so on. Firstly, it was possible that it was because they themselves were not talented enough, and secondly, it might be that they lacked the guidance of more talented seniors and did not have a systematic cultivation method. They were sure that in the previous civilization, the 12 meridians was definitely not the end of martial arts. The level of development of martial arts was probably unimaginable. Thus, if one could obtain a sect's martial arts insights, studying them would definitely be extremely beneficial. This was a huge opportunity. So how could these people not be excited? Yet Ling Han remained calm and collected, thinking that there was no chance. His talent in formations could be said to have surpassed anyone else, and added with that purple pendant capable of suppressing formations, he just barely managed to pluck 3 treasured fruits, but was still unable to enter the buildings. As for others, he now possessed 10 meridians level power, and he didn't believe that anyone could surpass him. Thus, these people could only be disappointed in the end. He didn't say anything, nor did he mention the purple pendant. He only said that he had some accomplishments in formations. Otherwise, some old geezers would definitely become greedy. Soon, Sun Jianfeng and the others reached a consensus. They were going to immediately head to the Jade Dragon mine. Ling Han also hurriedly washed up, then took some dried meat and rations with him, and similarly set out. After more than a day's journey, they once again arrived at the Jade Dragon mine. Ling Han was in charge of leading the team, and they all held lamps in their hands. They first arrived at the site of the historical site. Li Changdan's corpse was still lying there. When they saw his fatal injury, the elders all looked at Ling Han with strange expressions. They were all experienced in battle, and could tell with a single glance that Ling Han had used his overwhelming power to crush Li Changdan and kill him. A 9 meridians had killed another 9 meridians with his bare fists in a head-on confrontation. Furthermore, it was a prodigy like Li Changdan. What did this mean about Ling Han's strength? It had only been around 4 months, and this brat had already reached such heights. Some were wary, while others had other thoughts. For example, He Guan. He was thinking, could his granddaughter be betrothed to Ling Han? Previously, he had wanted to marry her to Li Changdan because of Li Changdan's future potential. Now, compared to Ling Han, Li Changdan was practically trash. However, everyone's attention quickly turned to the ancient site ahead of them. Such a large area of buildings was something that no one had ever set foot in before. It was very likely that there were martial arts books from the civilization of the last era hidden inside. If one obtained them, one might be able to soar in terms of cultivation level. They tried to advance, and all of them were cautious. However, they had only taken a single step, and they had all fled back in an incredibly sorry state. Some had their clothes slashed, and some had even suffered superficial injuries. Fortunately, no one had their arms or legs broken. After all, everyone was on guard. The treasure was right in front of their eyes, yet they could only look on. Everyone felt an itch in their hearts, feeling an indescribable gloom. Let's go and take a look at that ancient corpse. Sun Jianfeng waved his hand and made a decision. They arrived at the other part of the mine. Before they had even reached it, the stench had already assaulted them, causing everyone to involuntarily cover their noses. The ancient corpse appeared before them, but no one dared to approach. They had a feeling that they would die if they did. This should be that cultivation level above Meridian opening tier. Gu Tang declared excitedly, "The path hasn't been severed. The path hasn't been severed." He didn't have any descendants, and what he loved most was money and beautiful women. However, only cultivation was his true pursuit. It was just that he had long since lost all hope of advancing further, so he could only chase after women and money. Chapter 3137, 3137 Proposing Marriage. Chapter 3137, 3137 Proposing Marriage. 3137 Proposing Marriage. When martial arts began to flourish, everyone deduced that they would be ushering in a great era. However, this progress was a little slow. After more than 100 years, the peak stage of martial arts was still the 12 Meridians, even if countless people were extremely sure that there was a higher cultivation level above the 12 Meridians, but no one had ever reached it. Thus, this also made people wonder if this was perhaps just an illusion. One's power was limited at times, and a 12 Meridians could attain 50,000 kilograms of might. This was extremely terrifying. If one surpassed this foundation, would their human body be able to withstand it? But now, they had seen an ancient corpse with their own eyes and experienced the pressure that surpassed the 12 Meridians, which instantly strengthened their hearts that yearned for improvement in martial arts. There was no end to the path of martial arts. At least, if there was, it was definitely not the 12 Meridians. Everyone searched carefully and discovered a smaller cave in the depths of the cave. That cave was connected to an underground river. They were sure that the female lizard should have followed this underground river and coincidentally arrived here. It was strong because of the ancient corpse's blood. Originally, it might only have regarded this place as its lair, but the miners just happened to dig through this place. Thus, the female lizard charged out and treated everyone as its food. The ancient corpse can't be moved, but the blood can, Sun Jianfeng immediately said. Collect the blood and take it back for study. They fetched vessels and collected the corpse blood, then brought it back to the ancient Dao sect. The mine was reopened, and new miners were recruited to start work. There were also new supervisors in place. However, the last batch of miners was completely eliminated, leaving behind a terrifying legend. Later, the rumor spread that this mine had a demonic nature and would devour the miners, causing the ancient Dao sect to be unable to recruit people. Ling Han also returned to the ancient Dao sect. His life returned to normal, and he spent all day cultivating. He searched for information about formations on the optical computer, but unfortunately, there were very few books from the ancient times that had been unearthed. Aside from those found early on at the beginning, when there were also people who publicized them in order to increase the strength of the entire human race to fight against the demonic beasts. As time progressed, everyone kept their techniques to themselves. For example, even the elders could only learn 3 to 5 moves of the 4-directional fists, so how could they share it with all the surviving humans? Thus, Ling Han could only learn the 3 elements formation, and a few of the simplest formations. As for the more profound formations, perhaps books about formations hadn't appeared yet, or perhaps someone had mastered it, but kept it secret. Ling Han suddenly thought that if he had mastered high-level formations, he definitely wouldn't have publicized it so widely. Now that the heaven and earth had changed, ancient sites had appeared one after another, yet they were all protected by formations. If he had mastered formations, he would be able to secretly make a fortune. Who would be stupid enough to publicize it? Wasn't he afraid that he would be captured by some force and forced to focus on unraveling formations, yet would only be able to get a sliver of profit? Several days passed, and Huan Shui walked over to report to Ling Han that someone wanted to pay him a visit. "Who is it?" Ling Han asked. He had instructed Huan Shui that he would not meet any guests, but the usually obedient little female attendant actually reported it to him, indicating that the visitor was of high status, and Huan Shui could not refuse. "Elder He," Huan Shui said. "Oh." Ling Han was surprised. Why had He Guan come to find him? He stood up. Since he knew that He Guan had come, he naturally had to personally go and receive him. Though the Dao Child was the future sect master, he was still not as powerful as an elder now. "Elder He." Ling Han opened the door and saw that He Guan was indeed standing at the door. However, there was also a young girl with an arrogant expression he meowing. What the hell was this? "Haha, Dao Child Ling, this old man didn't disturb you, did I?" He Guan smiled amiably. "No." Ling Han also smiled and invited the two of them in. After exchanging pleasantries, He Guan praised Ling Han for a while. He praised Ling Han for being young and promising, causing Ling Han to doubt whether the person he was talking about was him or not. Was he, Ling Han, really that good? Finally, He Guan finally revealed the true purpose of their trip. "Dao Child Ling, you're not young anymore. As the old saying goes, one can only aspire for success after marriage." He wore a beaming smile and continued, "I'm not boasting, but this granddaughter of mine is both beautiful and has good moral character. In the future, she'll definitely be a good wife and mother." Ling Han was surprised. Was the old geezer trying to betroth He Miaoyin to him? The problem was, Li Changdan had only been dead for a few days, and he was already impatient. Ling Han looked at He Miaoyin, and this woman's expression was filled with arrogance. He shook his head and said, "At present, I have no plans to marry, so I will have to disappoint Elder He's kind offer." "Ling Han, what are you so smug about?" He Miaoyin immediately jumped up and pointed at Ling Han, her face filled with anger. "The fact that I agreed to marry you is already the virtue that your ancestors have accumulated for 8 lifetimes, and you actually dare to despise me?" "Little Een," He Guan hurriedly said darkly. He had just praised his granddaughter as the most virtuous and best wife, yet in the blink of an eye, she had revealed the face of an unruly young lady. Wasn't this a slap to his face? Only then did He Miaoyin shut up, but the corners of her lips still curled up, looking defiant. "Hee, marriage is a big matter, so there's no need to rush to make a decision. You can consider carefully." He Guan gave himself a way out, then left with his granddaughter. "Young master, thank goodness you didn't agree. Otherwise, if you married Miss He, you would definitely be bullied in the future." Huan Shui escorted them out, and when she returned, she began to complain. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "It's always been me bullying others. How can I be bullied by others?" He Miaoyin? Even if he was given the position of master over the entire celestial sea planet, he could not possibly marry such a woman. However, after being rejected like this, the He clan wouldn't give up so easily, especially He Miaoyin. She was so conceited, and now that she had been rejected, she would definitely fly into a humiliated rage. However, he already had the power of 10 Meridians, and only 10 Meridians elites or above could pose a threat to him. Could it be that He Miaoyin could still incite instances such as the elders to attack him? He couldn't be bothered to pay her any regard. In any case, he would deal with whatever came his way. Another few days later, the appraisal of the ancient corpse's blood was finally completed. There were extremely astonishing energy factors contained within, which were extremely beneficial for the growth of living beings. However, there was also a great amount of poison contained within. If it was directly consumed, it could possibly be fatal. This should also be the reason why those lizards had strong poison in their claws. But why did they not die? It could only be assumed that these lizards were far more resistant to poison than humans. The ancient Dao sect was presently refining this corpse blood, ingesting it or injecting it in the manner of medicine. It should be extremely helpful in improving one's cultivation level. Ling Han shook his head. He really didn't want to touch something like the blood of a corpse. There were many ways to increase cultivation level, so there was no need to use this kind of thing. However, while he had such scruples, the other disciples did not. They were all filled with anticipation, hoping that the successful development of these medicines would help them grow wings that could make them soar. A few days later, Ling Han was called over by Sun Jianfang, who said that he had discovered the volcanic fruit. Chapter 3138, 3138 Volcanic Fruit. Chapter 3138, 3138 Volcanic Fruit. 3138 Volcanic Fruit. At the beginning of the upheaval of heaven and earth, in the ancient site that was first discovered, a great deal of information was publicized for everyone to study in an attempt to find a way to help humans escape their predicament. Among them were the three elements formation and the most superficial formations. There was also a book of rare medicines, which recorded a large amount of information about precious fruits. By now, practically every force had a copy of this kind of information, which was extremely practical. The volcanic fruit was a treasured fruit that was recorded in the collection of rare medicines. It could allow cultivators of 9 meridians and above to successfully advance to the next cultivation level. The significance of this was extraordinary. From the 9 meridians to the 10 meridians, this was a qualitative leap. When power could be released, it could multiply one's battle prowess many times over even. It was also because of this that it was incredibly difficult to cross the threshold from the 9 meridians to the 10 meridians. Prodigies like Changdan were stuck at the peak stage of the 9 meridians for more than a year, yet they still couldn't see any hope of breaking through. Among the ancient Dao sect's prodigies, the fastest to break through to the 10 meridians was 54 years old, and this record was set by Sun Jianfang. At that time, rare medicines appeared all over the world, and there was no clear division of forces. Thus, the difficulty level of obtaining precious fruits wasn't very high. Most of the time, it was dependent on luck. But it was different now. Practically all the famous mountains and lakes which contained treasure trees and spiritual herbs were occupied by various forces, and they wanted to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. This was as difficult as ascending the heavens. In the case of this volcanic fruit, it had appeared in a pool, and it had been discovered by accident. However, there was also a python in this pool. It had definitely reached 10 meridians, and was constantly standing guard by the side of that volcanic fruit. If it had been any other treasured fruit, because everyone would have been wary of this python, they might have just let it go. However, they could not do that with the volcanic fruit. This could allow cultivators above the 8 meridians to take another step forward. It was too precious. As long as they didn't reach the 12 meridians, everyone would desire this. Moreover, this giant python definitely hadn't reached the 12 meridians. But what force didn't have elites of 12 meridians keeping watch? This naturally boosted their courage. Sun Jianfang would personally lead a team to that pool. However, their greatest opponent wasn't the python, but the elites sent by other forces. Such a good thing would definitely cause fights. Who didn't want to have another 10 meridians elite in their force? If one relied on himself to cultivate, it would really be difficult to accomplish that without reaching 70 or 80 years old, and by that time, the bodily functions would already be slowly degenerating. No matter how strong the mystical power was, his physical power would still be limited, and it would definitely affect his battle prowess. Power feared those who was younger and fitter. This was the logic. Thus, when this news spread out, the nearby forces would definitely be restless. There was no time to lose. Only a day later, Ling Han set out with Sun Jianfang. Accompanying them were Gu Tang and the other senior elders, as well as the younger generation like Nye Yang, Lao Lian, and Tan Gaobua. These elders all had their own plans. They wanted to leave the volcanic fruit for their own descendants. As long as they ingested it when they were in the 9 meridians, they would be able to soar all the way to 10 meridians. If one could advance into 10 meridians before 30 years old, then his future prospects would really be boundless. This pool was located at Sealed Mountains, and it was about 10 days' journey from the ancient Dao sect, and that was still with no delays on this journey, or it would take even longer. Ling Han was curious and asked, after such a long time, could it be that volcanic fruit has not been plucked yet? Sun Jianfang smiled and said, the volcanic fruit hasn't ripened yet, so even if someone arrives at this time, they won't be able to harvest it. At most, they'll only be able to get rid of that python. So that was how it was. They journeyed day and night, and would only rest when they were really tired. However, every day, when the sun rose, no one would miss out on the half an hour of cultivation time. They were all practicing fist techniques there. Ling Han found an excuse and walked far away. He used the brother monkey cultivation technique to cultivate. After he finished cultivating, he met up with the others. However, he couldn't always leave with an excuse. Sometimes, Ling Han would have to follow everyone and use the four-directional fists technique to absorb the mystical power of heaven and earth. However, the power he absorbed this way had too many impurities and was too impure. He would have to purify it with the brother monkey cultivation technique later. It would both slow down his progress and waste time. Thankfully, it was only about 10 days, and on the 11th day, they had arrived at Sealed Mountains. There were no ancient sites on this mountain, so it wasn't occupied by any human force. In fact, there weren't even many demonic beasts in fact. Moreover, at most, they were 2 meridians, 3 meridians or so. Thus, very few people would come here. It was also because a herb harvester had come here to try his luck, and in the end, he saw that python by the side of a pool, and when he ventured closer to take a look, he discovered the existence of the volcanic fruit. That person sold this information to a considerable number of forces, and it was also because of this that the news leaked out in the end, making it known to everyone. In Ling Han's group, there were as many as 8 elites above 10 meridians. This force was too powerful. Occasionally, they would encounter wild beasts or demonic beasts, and they would be killed with a palm strike or a punch from afar, becoming their next meal. When a demonic beast evolved, it was using mystical power to temper its body. This meat was also extraordinarily delicious. Even if it was only roasted, it was still incredibly delicious. Nyeyang, Tangaobwa, and the other young people usually stayed in the sect. There weren't any demonic beasts in Hyping Mountain, so they had to eat their fill when they went out. This made them feel like they didn't want to return. As he walked, Ling Han saw too many city ruins. The majority of them were abandoned, and some had become a playground for demonic beasts, occupied by them. In their place, the new cities built by humans were iron castles that were used to resist the invasion of demonic beasts. But even so, there were still castles that had been conquered. There was a place that made Sun Jianfeng and the others dumbfounded, unable to speak for a long time. That was because this castle had been flattened with a single stomp. Just how colossal was his physique, and how terrifying was his power to be able to flatten a steel fortress that had been forged from earth element iron. If such a terrifying beast invaded the ancient Dao sect, would the ancient Dao sect be able to stop it? According to Sun Jianfeng's deduction, this should have been a creature among the demonic beasts that had been the first to break through to a cultivation level above the Meridian opening tier. Its power had undergone a world-shaking improvement, and that was why it had such terrifying might. This wasn't good news. The reason why humans could struggle at death's door was because 12 Meridians elites had appeared among humans, capable of matching the strongest of demonic beasts. However, once a being that surpassed 12 Meridians elites appeared among demonic beasts, the balance would be broken. Don't worry too much. The ancient Dao sect is protected by formations, and it's not a place that just anyone can barge in as they please. Sun Jianfeng saw that everyone's morale was a little low, so he comforted them. Then, he said something very domineering, "In any case, I'm still here. What's there to be afraid of?" This was the pillar of support for the ancient Dao sect. Back then, it was Sun Jianfeng who had flattened Hyping Mountain with his fists. Even the demonic beasts had no choice but to retreat, surrendering this treasure mountain. Tiguan and the others all nodded, but they had other worries. Sun Jianfeng was old, after all, and was close to the limit of 150 years old. How many more years could he last? Chapter 3139, 3139, 10 Forces. Chapter 3139, 3139, 10 Forces. 3139, 10 Forces. Sealed mountains were filled with mountains that extended endlessly, with innumerable dangerous peaks. The target of Ling Han and the others was one of the mountains called Heaven Gazing Peak. The mountain slopes were extraordinarily steep. Fortunately, they were all above 7 meridians, at the very least. Their power was as high as 5,000 kilograms, and they were agile. Dangerous peaks weren't a big problem. However, the mountain was dangerous, after all, and it was difficult to climb. Thus, they still spent half a day's time to finally arrive at the mountain peak. An ordinary mountain peak was naturally sharp, like a sharp sword that pierced directly into the clouds, but this mountain peak was flat, like a bald head. On such a flat mountain peak, there was a pool. It was oval in shape, and at its longest, it was about 300 meters or so. At its widest, it was only about 150 meters. On the mountain peak, this pool really did not seem small. The sun was clearly shining brightly, but everyone felt a coldness rise up in their hearts. They had to channel their power to stimulate their blood flow, and only then would they be spared from being frozen. This cold air came from the pool. Above the pool, because the hot air encountered coldness, it turned into fog, making one feel as if they were floating. Ling Han and the others naturally weren't the only ones on the mountain peak. There were also 9 groups of people, each occupying a specific spot. The number of people in each group varied. At least, there were only 9 of them, and at most there were 20 plus of them. However, they had one similarity, and that was they were old and young, and the gap in age was very wide. The ancient Dao sect is here. When they saw Sun Jianfang and his group, these forces spoke up one after another. Even Sun Jianfang has been mobilized? Hee, looks like the ancient Dao sect really values this. Hasn't your Netherworld faction also mobilized Meng Ruining, Leader Meng? Hee, for the sake of volcanic fruit, this is very normal. Sun Jianfang's eyes swept over them and paused on every group of people. He smiled and said, "There are really a lot of old friends here." "Old geezer's son, you're not dead yet," a white-haired old man called out loudly. His body was thick and sturdy. Even though he was old, he was like a human-shaped bear, exuding an astonishing feeling of power. "This is Ji Yuanlong, the sect master of the Divine Wind sect," Sun Jianfang introduced in a low voice to Ling Han and the others. Then, he laughed loudly. "Old geezer Ji, you didn't die yet. So do you have the nerve to curse me? You're already at 12 Meridians, so why are you still here?" Ji Yuanlong asked. Sun Jianfang shook his head. "Isn't it the same as you? I can't let go. I heard that your ancient Dao sect has a prodigy called Li Dan or something. Just in time. I also have a great-grandson who can be considered quite successful. Why don't we let them spar for a while?" Ji Yuanlong said. He waved his hand, and a young man walked out. His figure was also extremely sturdy, like an iron tower. This young man clasped his hands in greeting and said to Ling Han, "I am Ji Pingfei, and would like to ask Senior Brother Li for some guidance." Sun Jianfang's mouth involuntarily twitched. Li Changdan had betrayed the sect, and he had long since been killed by Ling Han. How could he come out to spar? However, this was an internal scandal, so there was naturally no reason to publicize it. He said indifferently, "Li Changdan didn't come." Ji Yuanlong glared at him and said, "Old geezer son, are you afraid of losing?" Sun Jianfang looked at Ji Yuanlong and said, "If you are not convinced, I'll beat you into submission." Ji Yuanlong was instantly enraged. He rolled up his sleeves and said, "Fine, we'll fight. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" Hee, calm down, both of you. Don't be so tense." Someone stepped out to mediate the fight. He was also indescribably old. His white brows drooped down for about an inch, and even his eyes were covered. Who knew if he could see clearly? "Why don't we compete and see who can kill the giant python in the water first?" This was Chao Tsong from the Blue Feather City. He belonged to the same generation as Sun Jianfang and Ji Yuanlong. Now, he was also naturally the strongest king tier of the 12 Meridians. "How do we kill it?" Ji Yuanlong asked with a roll of his eyes. He had a fiery temper, and it was as if he didn't like anyone he saw. "We can hold our breath for at most 10 minutes, yet this pool is extraordinarily deep. It's impossible to kill that demonic beast in such a short amount of time." A giant snake above the level of 9 meridians, its gallbladder is a treasure. An old woman clicked her tongue and said, "According to the ancient books, this can turn into 100 poisons. and can also nourish the eyes and improve the vision. What's the use of talking about this? Ji Yuanlong still had a bad temper, and he would speak back to anyone he saw. Can you force that giant python out? Or can you hold your breath for half an hour? I can't be bothered to talk to you. The old woman waved her sleeve and didn't reply. It was as if she knew that this old geezer had a strange temper, so she didn't lower herself to his level. Actually, there is a way. An old man walked out. He was dressed in robes and was waving a feather fan in his hand, looking quite sage-like. However, when they saw this old man walk out, both Sun Jianfeng and Chao Tsung frowned. Even Ji Yuanlong didn't oppose him. Old poisonous creature, you're always playing with poison, and you're actually still alive. This is really a miracle, the old woman said instead. The old man in robes laughed loudly. If we still do not break through, in 10 years at most, it would be about time for us to step into the coffin, right? Sun Jianfeng and the others were all solemn. The limit of their lifespans had always been a problem that they had deliberately avoided. This old poisonous creature was also from the same generation as them. At that time, he had been a doctor who had saved lives and healed injuries, but who knew that after the great calamity, he was further and further down the path of playing with poison, causing others to feel wary. Afterwards, he established the 100 Poisons sect and took in a considerable number of disciples, all of whom were skilled in poison. Poison has always been feared by others. Even the king tier of the 12 Meridians didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. Old Venom, what do you suggest? Ji Yuanlong asked. His tone was slightly more polite than usual. Simple, Old Venom said calmly. He took out a bottle from his robes, walked to the side of the pool, opened the cork, and carefully dripped a drop of liquid. He revealed a smile and said, "This is a new type of poison that I've carefully developed. Don't underestimate it. Although there's only one drop, it can turn the entire pool into a pool of strong poison." Everyone came over to take a look and saw that the originally clear pool was rapidly turning black. There was also a faint pungent smell that assaulted their noses, causing them to feel dizzy. This was truly terrifying. Merely the smell was already making them so uncomfortable, then what would happen if the body really touched it? Boom! Right at this moment, ripples appeared on the water's surface, and a large snake as thick as a water bucket suddenly broke through the water's surface, turning into something akin to a stream and soaring onto the shore. Sure enough, this poison was far too terrifying. Even the demonic beast that was as powerful as a king tier was unable to withstand it. Once ashore, this large snake coiled its body, its head protecting its body that was like a small hill. It swept its gaze around proudly, its eyes like lanterns, exuding a murderous light that would make one shiver. Old Venom, you've poisoned the volcanic fruit as well. Ji Yuanlong roared. Don't worry. A treasure like the volcanic fruit is only afraid of fire attacks. Poison is harmless against it, Old Venom said calmly. Now that this large snake has come out, how do you guys want to kill it? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.